Good morning, everyone. I'm calling the Senate Ways and Means Committee to order for the meeting on February 5th. We are here for the purpose of executive session on, I think, 80 or 81 bills that are listed. They are divided into 5 packets. If you look at the agenda that's been published, I think it's 5. The process will be that we get a staff briefing on a packet, then we will break for caucus on that packet of bills, come back, vote, and then move on to the next packet. So we'll work our way through the agenda in that manner. We will be taking a break for lunch sometime around lunchtime. The ideal would be that we get through packet 1 and get briefed on packet 2 and then take a lunch break, but that is all, of course, subject to change. So with that, let's get started with staff briefings on the bills in packet 1. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Sam Brown, committee staff. The first bill is Senate Bill 6296, establishing a retail industry work group. After this bill was referred to committee, a fiscal note was produced that indicated costs of 12,000 GFS in the biennium and 22,000 over the outlook period. So it's staff's understanding that the committee intent is to refer that to rules without recommendation. Seeing no questions, the next bill is Senate Bill 5799 concerning the sale of halal foods. It comes to you from the Agriculture Committee and was heard on Saturday. This bill prohibits the sale or marketing of food as halal, prepared in accordance with Islamic dietary principles, when the food product is in fact not halal. A violation of the act is punishable as a gross misdemeanor and subject to civil enforcement under the Consumer Protection Act. A fiscal note shows anticipated costs to the Attorney General's office of 284,000 GFS in the current biennium and 570,000 over the outlook period for staffing to investigate and bring claims. There are no known amendments at this time. Seeing no questions, the next bill is Senate Bill 5427 concerning people who have been targeted or affected by hate crimes and bias incidents. This came to you last session from the Law and Justice Committee, and you heard a proposed substitute, which is annotated as number 1 in the electronic bill book, on Thursday, January 18th. The proposed substitute creates a hotline in the Attorney General's office to receive reports of hate crimes or bias incidents and refer callers to services as needed. Law enforcement receiving reports of hate crimes or bias incidents are directed to direct callers to that hotline. The sub provides an implementation schedule. It's to be piloted in 3 counties, including one east of the Cascades by July 1st of 2025, implemented statewide by January 1st, 2027. The Attorney General must also establish an advisory committee to assist in the implementation of the hotline and provide annual reports to the legislature. A fiscal note is available on the proposed substitute showing costs of 608,000 general fund state in the current biennium and about $2.5 million over the outlook period. Costs include a contract specialist to manage the vendor contract for the hotline, a policy analyst for outreach and program management, and then direct costs associated with contracting out the hotline to a vendor. The bill contains a null and void clause. There's one amendment to the proposed sub in the electronic bill book, Amendment 2, offered by Senator Dingra. This amendment modifies the definition of bias incident in 2 ways. It includes ethnicity as a basis for a bias incident and excludes all protected expressions of support or opposition to government policies from the definition of bias incident. No other known amendments at this time. Seeing no questions, the next bill is substitute Senate Bill 5838 concerning the establishment of an artificial intelligence task force. This was at the request of the Attorney General and comes from the Environment Committee. It was heard on Tuesday, January 30th. The bill, as referred, would create a task force staffed by the Attorney General to assess AI uses and trends and recommend standards for the use and regulation of artificial intelligence to the legislature. The Attorney General would be able to convene subcommittees to advise the 9-member executive committee of the task force on specified topics. A final report from the task force is due November 1st, 2025, and must cover public policy issues, high-risk uses, and opportunities for regulation and support of innovation. The bill contains an emergency clause and also is subject to appropriations. The measure was not funded in the governor's budget. The fiscal note on the sub heard in committee indicates costs of 670,000 general fund state over the current biennium and about 940,000 over the outlook period to the Attorney General for staff support and a consultant for data analysis. There's one amendment on the electronic bill book, proposed second substitute 3, which is offered by Senator Wen. This makes a number of changes, predominantly to the policy, but there may be some fiscal impacts as well. The proposed substitute expands the executive committee to include one member each, representing technology industry groups or business associations, organizations that represent vulnerable communities, labor, and law enforcement. It also requires that non-legislator executive committee members have experience in technology policy. It transfers authority regarding subcommittees that advise the executive committee to the executive committee from the Attorney General's office itself. So the executive committee would be able to convene subcommittees, define their scope and subject matter focus, and then appoint members in collaboration with the Attorney General. Each subcommittee would be required to contain at least one member that possesses relevant industry expertise. Their meeting summaries and reports would have to be available on the Attorney General's website. The proposed second sub also requires that the Chief Information Officer be consulted on staffing and administration of the task force. Reports must cover protections of personhood, including voice or likeness. The sub also updates definitions of AI, generative artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and moves report deadlines back and requires a third interim report. With that, that summarizes the amendment. I'm available for questions on this bill. Seeing none, the next bill on the list is Senate Bill 6098 concerning accounts. It's OFM request legislation that was heard on Monday, January 15th. It does 4 things: abolishes 8 accounts that are either inactive or contain no balance, transfers expenditure authority for the down payment assistance account to the Director of the Department of Commerce, creates 2 new accounts, the Fern Lodge maintenance account and the Clean Fuel credit account, and then transfers the remaining balance in the Washington Sexual Assault Kit account, which has been closed, to the fingerprint identification account. Fiscal note shows no estimated impact, no known amendments to this bill.
Good morning, Sandy Stith, staff to the committee. Next up is Senate Bill 5986. This comes to you from Health and Long-Term Care, and you heard this on January 29th. This is related to protecting consumers from charges for out-of-network healthcare services by prohibiting balance billing for ground ambulance services and addressing coverage of transports for emergency medical conditions. By January 1st, non-participating ground ambulance service organizations may not balance bill enrollees for covered ground ambulance services. This also determines the amount non-participating ground ambulance providers may be paid for these types of transports. Has OIC in consultation with HCA contracting for an analysis of potential cost or cost savings for covered services where ground ambulance is dispatched and the person is treated but not transported. And also has WISIP doing a study to recommend whether emergency medical services should be an essential service provided by state and local entities and funded exclusively by those state and local dollars. That report is due by October 1st, 2026. There is a fiscal note in your EBB. The total cost over the 4-year is $1,350,000, of which $458,000 are general fund state. Those costs are in the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, Department of Health, and Evergreen State College. For arbitration costs, market analysis, rulemaking, and the study by WISIP. There is one known amendment, amendment number 4 by Senator Muzal. And what that does is it removes the requirement that WISIP provide the recommendations on whether emergency medical services should be treated as an essential health service provided by local and state governments, and instead directs Department of Health to make those recommendations based on the WISIP study. Happy to answer any questions.
Senate Bill 5906 requires the Department of Health to implement an ongoing drug overdose campaign and education campaign for youth and adults, and provide an annual report to the legislature on the content, mediums of delivery, and data on individuals who've received the campaign. This bill was heard in this committee on January 29th and has an estimated 4-year cost to the department of $9.3 million, general fund state. Substitute Senate Bill 5943 directs the Department of Social and Health Services to conduct a feasibility study for implementation of a resource data tool, mobile application, and web portal. This bill was heard on February 3rd and has a one-time cost of $859,000 in fiscal year 2025 to DSHS. There's a proposed substitute and one amendment to the substitute that was heard in committee. The proposed substitute is number 5, offered by Senator Gildon, and would direct the Washington Information Network 211 to develop and implement a resource data tool and mobile application to connect Washington residents to resources and services. This language is identical to the underlying bill, which had a fiscal note available, which cited an indeterminate impact. Amendment number 6, also offered by Senator Gildon, is to the substitute that was heard in this committee, and it specifies the members of the advisory group established in the bill, while also directing the group to vote on and submit a feasibility study to the Department of Social and Health Services. Senate Bill 6286 directs the Washington Board of Nursing to establish a preceptor grant program for certified registered nurse anesthetists and for the Healthcare Workforce Council to collaborate with the University of Washington Center for Health Workforce Studies to study the anesthesia workforce shortage. This bill was heard on February 3rd and has a 4-year cost of $1.2 million general fund state. There's a proposed substitute offered by Senator Rivers. It's number 7 in your EBB. This changes references from nurse anesthesia residents to nurse anesthesia students, while also changing the parameters of the study and directing that the Health Workforce Council collaborate with the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Substitute Senate Bill 6110 makes changes to the child fatality statute by specifying what information local health jurisdictions can request and retain while conducting a child fatality review and allowing the Department of Health to analyze data information obtained during the review. This bill was heard on February 3rd and has a 4-year cost of $388,000 general fund state to the Department of Health. There's a proposed amendment, number 8, offered by Senator Gildon, that would allow information obtained during child fatality reviews to be used in criminal proceedings and would also allow for employees and members of the review team to be questioned during a criminal proceeding. Third substitute, Senate Bill 5438, directs the Healthcare Authority and Department of Social and Health Services to review policies and programs against principles outlined in the bill and requires both agencies to administer oversight functions that both nurture and protect the relationships of behavioral health service clients. This bill was heard on February 2nd and has a 4-year cost of $5 million. $3.7 million of that is to the general fund state, with the remainder being federal funding. Substitute Senate Bill 5937 makes several changes to statutes related to sexual assault, sex trafficking, and domestic violence, including establishing the statewide forensic nurse coordination program at the Department of Health and expanding benefits and eligibility for the Crime Victims Compensation Program at the Department of Labor and Industries. This bill was heard on February 3rd and has a 4-year cost of $3.9 million general fund state. There's a proposed substitute, number 9, offered by Senator Dingra. This amendment, this proposed substitute clarifies when victims may be eligible for the Crime Victim Compensation Program with regard to cooperation with law enforcement. This expands to all victims of crimes. It also removes references to prosecutors asserting and seeking enforcement of procedures under the Rape Shield statute. It modifies crime victims' rights to remotely attend court proceedings, as well as modifying language so that only victims of violent offenses, domestic violence, or sex offense victims are to be informed of when defendants are found not competent to stand trial. There are also changes to language around state-to-state reimbursements for examinations, and seeing no questions, Senate Bill 6308 extends timelines for the implementation of tech platforms developed by the Healthcare Authority and Department of Health, and extends the due date for the final report by the steering committee. And this bill was heard on February 3rd and has no fiscal impact.
The next bill before you is substitute Senate Bill 6228. This bill requires health plans to authorize up to 28 days of inpatient or residential substance use disorder treatment on first utilization review, requires health plans to cover transportation to behavioral health emergency services providers and additional transportation at discharge, caps substance use disorder professional certification fees at $100 until July 1st of 2029, and removes limitations on license and certification renewals for associate marriage and family therapists, associate mental health counselors, associate social workers, and substance use disorder professional trainees. The fiscal note indicates determinate costs of $1.9 million in total funds in the 23-25 biennium and $124,000 in general fund state over the 4-year outlook period from impacts to the state's PEB and SEB programs. In addition, the fiscal note indicates indeterminate costs in the range of $12 to $17 million from the general fund annually. For the 28 days of authorization provided in the bill, that impact is on the state's Medicaid program. There is a proposed substitute, number 10 in your packets, offered by Senator Dingra. That substitute reduces the minimum initial authorization period for treatment from 28 days to 14 days, and requires that subsequent authorizations be at least for 7 days. It specifies that a medical necessity review for inpatient or residential substance use disorder treatment must not be based primarily on the patient's length of abstinence, and that length of abstinence may not be considered if the total period was due to incarceration or hospitalization. It prohibits a health plan issued or renewed after January 1st of 2025 from considering a patient's length of stay at a behavioral health agency when making decisions to authorize continued care at the behavioral health agency. It removes provisions in the underlying bill requiring health plans and managed care organizations to cover ground ambulance transport to a behavioral health provider and also the discharge transportation from a behavioral health emergency services provider. It prohibits substance use disorder professional trainees from providing independent substance use disorder counseling or clinical services for a fee. It requires the Healthcare Authority, in collaboration with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, to develop standardized clinical documentation requirements for initial authorization and concurrent utilization review, which must be put into place by July 1 of 2025. And finally, it requires the Healthcare Authority to provide a gap analysis of non-emergency transport benefits for Medicaid enrollees, comparing the benefits in Washington state to benefits in Oregon and other states by December 1st of 2024. These amendments would reduce both the determinate and the indeterminate fiscal impacts of the bill by removing the transport requirements, as well as reducing the utilization period from 28 days down to 14 days. Next up is substitute Senate Bill 5853. This bill.
Corbin, just a minute. Excuse me, Senator Mullet has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any sense with that substitute, the impact on the fiscal exactly? Or?
My read of the substitute is that it would be a substantial reduction to the fiscal impact. Okay. It would cut the 28-day period down to 14 days. Our current average length of stay is about 11 and a half days, so that would be a substantial reduction.
Thank you.
Next up is substitute Senate Bill 5853. This bill allows 23-hour crisis relief centers to serve children, but not in the same treatment area as adults. The bill has an indeterminate fiscal impact should these facilities come online and offer services. The Department of Health does note determinate costs of $134,000 in fee-supported expenditures to support rulemaking, licensure, review, and inspections. You heard a proposed substitute in committee labeled as number 11 in your packet. There's an additional proposed substitute, number 12, offered by Senator Dingra. This amendment requires a crisis relief center or a CRC, which proposes to serve both child and adult clients in the same facility to create separate entrances, spaces, and treatment areas such that no contact occurs between children and adult clients. It requires the Department of Health to consult with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to solicit input from stakeholders when making rules for CRCs that serve clients. And it requires the Department of Health to undergo rulemaking for CRCs which serve children, including discharge planning for a child who is at risk of dependency, out-of-home placement, or homelessness, and requiring agencies to have written policies and procedures defining how different age groups will be appropriately separated. Finally, the amendment allows the staff of a CRC to detain an adolescent whom the staff regards as presenting as an imminent danger to themselves or others based on a behavioral health disorder for evaluation by a designated crisis responder for up to 12 hours from notification of the need for evaluation. The amendment should not substantially impact the costs in the fiscal note. The next bill before you is Substitute Senate Bill 6251. The bill requires Behavioral Health Administrative Service Organizations, or BHASOs, to develop protocols for coordination and dispatching of crisis services where they determine it is of practical value, and it allows BHASOs to recommend 988 Contact Hub contractors within their respective service area. The fiscal note indicates costs of $11 million to the general fund in the 23-25 biennium and $35 million over the 4-year outlook period. However, the majority of these costs are driven by indeterminate aspects of the bill. There is a proposed substitute labeled as number 13 offered by Senator Dingra. The proposed substitute restores language from the underlying bill, which allows the Department of Health to designate rather than certify 988 contact hubs. It allows a BHASO to decide whether to convene behavioral health crisis system partners and stakeholders to develop protocols, and specifies that the development of such protocols must be within available resources. It requires a BHASO which chooses to develop regional protocols to submit them to the Healthcare Authority instead of the Department of Health, the Healthcare Authority, and the statewide 911 coordinator. It provides that if the Healthcare Authority does not respond within 90 days of submission of those protocols, they shall be considered approved until such a time as HCA and the BHASO agreed to the updated standards. It requires a BHASO which does not intend to develop regional protocols under the bill to notify the Healthcare Authority by January 1st of 2025. It allows the Department of Health to designate an additional 988 contact hub recommended by a BHASO if the addition of that 988 contact hub is consistent with the need identified in those regional protocols. It requires the Department of Health to provide the BHASO with a written explanation if the department declines to designate a 988 contact hub recommended by the BHASO. And finally, it requires the Department of Health to revoke the designation of a 988 contact hub if it fails to substantially comply with contract, data sharing agreements, or approved regional protocols. And instead, they may certify a 988 contact hub recommended by a BHASO, which is able to meet necessary state and federal guidelines. The amendment should clarify some indeterminate costs of the bill, as several provisions in the bill are amended to specify that the activities must be undertaken within available resources.
Senator Dingra.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. Just so that I make sure everyone understands clearly, this only requires the BHASOs to do a coordinated plan within available resources. So I'm assuming the HCA fiscal note, do you have any explanation of why there's an HCA fiscal note if the BHASOs are doing the work within available resources?
The Healthcare Authority fiscal note does assume additional resources for the BHASOs to develop those protocols.
But the bill is clear that.
But the bill does specify that the creation of those protocols must occur within available resources.
And if I have another.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And then in terms of the Department of Health fiscal note, the only change there is requiring that they consider the recommendation made by the BHASOs and then provide written notification if they don't make a decision based on the recommendation. Is that correct?
That is correct. And in terms of the fiscal note, the one driver of the determinant aspect of the fiscal note from the Department of Health was allowing regional crisis lines to participate as public safety answering point pilots. That provision in the bill does say that the department may include that funding in their contracts. It does not require that funding to be in the contract, so that would be an indeterminate fiscal impact.
Okay, thank you.
The next bill before you is Substitute Senate Bill 6220 related to high THC cannabis. The bill requires the Department of Health to develop training for retail cannabis staff about high THC cannabis, requires the Liquor and Cannabis Board, or LCB, to define high THC by July 1st of 2026. It prohibits the sale of high THC cannabis to those under the age of 25, except for qualifying patients and designated providers. And subject to funding, it requires the University of Washington to develop and implement guidance and health interventions for healthcare providers and patients at risk for developing serious complications due to cannabis consumption. The fiscal note indicates costs of $800,000 in general fund state in the 23-25 biennium and $2.7 million over the 4-year outlook period. There are two amendments. Amendment 14, offered by Senator Saldana, removes the provisions that provide legislative intent to the Department of Health for recurring funding for targeted marketing campaigns related to the risks for persons under age 25 related to high THC products. It removes the provision requiring DOH to develop optional training for retail cannabis staff, and it removes the provision that, subject to funding, the University of Washington should develop and implement guidance and health interventions. This amendment would remove the fiscal impact of the bill to the Department of Health and the University of Washington. What would remain in the fiscal note would be $120,000 in general fund state at the Liquor and Cannabis Board to enforce the restrictions in the bill. Amendment 15 is offered by Senator Wilson. This would remove the provision increasing the minimum legal age of sale for cannabis products with high THC concentration at age 25, and it would also remove the provision allowing the governor to seek government-to-government consultations with federally recognized Indian tribes regarding raising the minimum legal age for the sale of cannabis products with high THC concentration. This amendment would remove the fiscal impact to the Liquor and Cannabis Board for enforcement of those provisions. The cost of that enforcement is estimated at $120,000 over 4 years.
I don't see any questions. Thank you. That concludes the staff briefing for packet 1. So we will now go to caucus, and we have the same caucus rooms as we've had, Republicans in ABC and Democrats in 3 across the hall. We'll be back in a while. Calling us back into executive session for the purpose of voting on bills. I will start by saying that we will not be taking action on Substitute Senate Bill 6220.
You're all set, I can start.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 6296, Retail Industry Work Group, without recommendation to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6296 move without recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Senate Bill 6296 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 5799 concerning the sale of halal food receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5799 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Senate Bill 5799 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move proposed substitute Senate Bill 5427 concerning people who have been targeted or affected by hate crimes and bias incidents receive a due pass recommendation. And there's an amendment labeled 2 by Senator Dingra. And I move amendment number 2.
Amendment 2 by Senator Dingra has been moved and seconded. Senator Dingra, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Robinson. This is an amendment that all the stakeholders have agreed to and the prime sponsor has approved. And so I am offering that in order to perfect the bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of adopting Amendment 2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 5427. That substitute Senate Bill 5427 receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5427 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? I don't see any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 5427 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5838, establishing an artificial intelligence task force, receive a due pass recommendation. And there is a proposed sub. I move proposed substitute second bill, or I move proposed second substitute 3 by me, by Senator Nguyen.
Proposed Second substitute 3 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the proposed second substitute? Is that a question, Senator Rivers?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of feedback that we received after that last hearing that I've been getting as well, trying to provide more balance within the committee structure itself, along with augmenting some of the folks who have a say as it relates to the topics and kind of how it's ran. I think that there's probably a couple other things that we'll need to address as well, but it was a short weekend in terms of getting some stuff out before stakeholders are able to review. So this is kind of my first pass as we send it over to the House, if it makes it that far.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adopting proposed second substitute 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The proposed second substitute is adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5838 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5838 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 5838 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6098 concerning accounts receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6098 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Senate Bill 6098 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5986, protecting consumers from out-of-network healthcare services charges, receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee. And there is an amendment labeled 4 by Senator Mazzal, so I move the amendment 4.
Amendment 4 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I will recommend that we take this amendment. It has been agreed to by stakeholders. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment has been adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 5986, and that substitute Senate Bill 5986 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5986 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 5986 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5906, implementing a statewide drug overdose prevention and education campaign, receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5906 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Senate Bill 5906 with a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5943, Resource Data Tool, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee. And there is a proposed substitute there's a proposed second substitute 5 by Senator Gildon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll withdraw the proposed sub.
Thank you so much. So then I'll move the proposed,
Oh, just move the amendment.
I move Amendment 6 by Senator Gildon.
Amendment 6 to the original substitute Senate bill has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting Amendment 6, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 6 is adopted.
I move that second substitute Senate Bill 5943 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5946.
Is that right? Or?
Clarify that you're rolling it into into a second sub, please.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
The adopted amendment.
I move that the adopted amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill, second substitute Senate Bill 5943 and receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5943 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 5943 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6286, nurse anesthetist workforce, receive a due pass recommendation. Anesthetist. Anesthetist, sorry about that. I'll try my best. There is a proposed substitute, number 7, so I move a proposed substitute 7 by Senator Rivers.
Proposed substitute 7 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Proposed substitute 7 has been adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the proposed that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 6286, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6286 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 6286 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 6110, modernizing the child fatality statute, receive a due pass recommendation. Oh, and there is an Amendment 8 by Senator Gildon, so I move Amendment 8.
Amendment 8 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. There seems to be some disagreement as to what this amendment will do. I hope that we can continue the conversation on this and figure out if it's the right course to go on or not, but for now, we'll go ahead and withdraw it.
Okay. So in that case, I'll move substitute Senate Bill 6110, modernizing the child fatality statute, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
Substitute Senate Bill 6110 has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6110 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 6110 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that third substitute Senate Bill 5438 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that third substitute Senate Bill 5438 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Do you want to say anything, Senator Warnick?
Okay.
Okay. All right. With no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, third substitute Senate Bill 5438 has been moved to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 5937, crime victims and witness, receive a due pass recommendation. And there is a proposed second substitute 9 by Senator Dingler, so I move proposed second substitute 9.
Proposed second substitute 9 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Dingler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposed sub has clarifications and technical amendments, but the big thing that it does do is that it removes the requirement that local prosecutors engage with the multidisciplinary teams to help address sexual assaults. These teams do exist in a few of our jurisdictions, but are not available statewide, and I completely understand that there are workforce issues at the prosecutor's office that prohibit, that make it hard for them to coordinate this. But, so that has been removed, but I will just note that is the best practices. And hopefully moving forward, we can get to a point in our state where we actually do have the multidisciplinary teams to address sexual assault in our state. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded to adopt proposed second substitute 9. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 9 has been adopted.
Thank you so much. I move that the proposed amendments be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5937 and it receives a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5937 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 5937 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6308, extending the timelines for implementation of the 988 systems, receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6308 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Senate Bill 6308 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 6228 concerning treatment of substance use disorders receive a due pass recommendation. There is a proposed second substitute 10 by Senator Dingra, so I move proposed second substitute 10.
Proposed second substitute 10 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Dingra?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope everyone was as horrified as me to hear that the average length of stay that's been approved for people for inpatient treatment is 11 days in our state, when we know that 28 is really what is needed. This bill, in the interest of our fiscal note, makes it 14. So it's a step in the right direction, but I think this is an issue that has to be solved on how we are providing treatment for individuals with substance use disorder. And it does require more work to be done in terms of non-emergency transport, because that's the other issue that has been flagged over and over again as being a barrier to successful entry into inpatient treatment. Thank you.
Any further discussion? We're on the proposed second substitute.
Oh, we did that. We need to vote for it.
Right.
Yeah.
The proposed second substitute, all in favor of proposed second substitute 10 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 10 has been adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the substitute be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6228 and it receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6228 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6228 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 5853, Behavioral Health Crisis Services for Minors, receive a due pass recommendation. And there is a proposed second substitute 11 by Senator Dingra.
It's withdrawn.
And then you withdraw it, perfect. So in that case, I move proposed second substitute 12 by Senator Dingra.
Second substitute 12 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Dingra.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. This includes all the feedback from the stakeholders on everything they want the rulemaking process to entail.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of adopting proposed second substitute 12 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 12 has been adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5853 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee. Perfect. Yep.
He's okay.
Yep.
Second substitute Senate Bill 5853 it's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5853 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5853 has moved to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 6251, Coordinating Regional Behavioral Crisis Response Services, receive a due pass recommendation. And there is a proposed second substitute 13 by Senator Dingro, so I move proposed substitute second substitute 13.
Proposed second substitute 13 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Dingro.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. This proposed substitute clarifies that the BHASO work that they're doing on creating a regional crisis plan is to be done within existing resources. And the part about DOH, it says DOH is the entity that designates the 988 contact hubs. They have to take into account the recommendation made by the BHASOs and has to provide a written documentation if that recommendation is not followed. And I urge your adoption. Thank you.
All in favor of adopting proposed second substitute 13, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The second substitute is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 6251 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6251 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 6251 to the Rules Committee, subject to signature. And that concludes Packet 1.
So packet number 2, the first bill, substitute Senate Bill 5953 concerning financial aid grants for incarcerated students. This bill came to you from the Human Services Policy Committee. This allows incarcerated individuals to apply for and utilize federal and state financial aid grants for post-secondary education programs at the Department of Corrections. The 2-year total fund impact is $1.2 million, and it also includes indeterminate costs and savings. The 4-year general fund state impact is $3.2 million, and that also there are additional indeterminate costs and savings. There are no known amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6021 concerning reducing fees and expenses for services for people confined to correctional facilities. This bill came to you from the Human Services Committee. This requires the Department of Corrections to provide free voice communication services in all its correctional facilities. The 2-year total fund impact is $1.5 million, and there's also indeterminate costs given the unknown new contract rates that the Department of Corrections would need to negotiate. The 4-year general fund state impact is $5.5 million, and also there are additional indeterminate costs given the new contract rates. There is one amendment. Amendment number 16 in your EBV is offered by Senator Nguyen, which delays the effective date from the December 1st, 2024 to July 1st, 2025. This is anticipated to reduce fiscal impacts by at least $1.5 million this biennium. Senate Bill 5981 concerning the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board. This bill came to you from the Human Services Policy Committee. This allows a person convicted of a crime committed prior to the person's 18th birthday to petition the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board for early release at age 24. The 2-year impact is $2.8 million. Total funds, the 4-year impact is $12.5 million. There are 3 amendments. Amendment number 17 in your EBBs is offered by Senator Braun. This restores current law by requiring the person serve no less than 20 years of total confinement and not be convicted for any crime committed after turning 18 years old in order to be eligible to petition the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board for early release. In terms of change for fiscal impact, this will significantly impact the fiscal cost. Amendment number 18 in your EVB is offered by Senator Braun. And this amendment, instead of being able to petition the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board at age 24 or older, this requires the person to reach age 24 or older or serve at least half of their sentence time in total confinement, whichever is greater. This, in terms of fiscal impact, will also significantly reduce the costs reflected in the fiscal note. And then you have the third amendment, which is amendment number 19, offered by Senator Saldana. This amendment limits the number of petitions from persons made eligible to petition under this act that are acted on or responded to by the Department of Corrections and the Indeterminate Sentence Review Board to 40 per year. Within the 40 petitions per year, it requires the Department of Corrections to prioritize examinations and ISRB, Indeterminate Sentence Review Board, to prioritize hearings on early release petitions in a certain priority order, with the highest priority given to petitioners in the custody of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, first, and petitioners who most recently, transferred to the Department of Corrections from DCYF second. Requires a person who is at DCYF when their petition for early release is granted by the ISRB to remain in the custody of DCYF until their ordered release. And it requires the maximum of 40 cases in prioritization section to expire on July 1st, 2034. In terms of fiscal impact, this also substantially reduces the fiscal impact given the cap to 40.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 40, what's the expected amount without that limitation?
So the amount in the fiscal note from the department was they anticipate there would be 267, and then they're adding 12 per year. So there was in the TOC fiscal note an expectation of 40 per year possible for the assessments by health services. And so there's that number there. So they'd be reducing from, according to the data from the department in their fiscal note, the assumption in 25 was 120, and then 147 in 26, and 152 in 27. So those numbers would be dropping to 40.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Wagner, do you still have a question? No, you're good? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Substitute Senate Bill 5893, providing gate money to incarcerated individuals at the Department of Corrections. This bill came to you from the Human Services Committee. This extends the provision of gate money to individuals transferring to partial confinement settings and community custody. There is no fiscal impact. There is one amendment. Amendment number 20 in your EBBs is offered by Senator Wynn, and this exempts gate money from mandatory deductions by the Department of Corrections. The amendment is not anticipated to change the fiscal impact, which is no impact.
Senator Mullet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How is it saying there is no impact? I couldn't just...
So the Department of Corrections received in the 23 session additional funding for up to the $300. So previously they were paying $40 at release for gate money. Now they're paying $300. And the assumption in the budget, the underlying budget, was based on the number of releases, and the data definition from the department included partial confinement in that number.
there any further questions? Any questions? There's a question up here, I will say,
Okay.
asking for a friend. Tell us what the bill does.
For that particular bill, this bill, it's providing the gate money. So currently, the department provides gate money at release from a prison facility, a full incarceration facility. However, when they release and then they move to partial confinement, the current law doesn't allow them to provide that. So this expands it to allow them to then provide that gate money when the individual is leaving from those locations.
And that was already budgeted.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we got it now. Thank you.
All right. Substitute Senate Bill 6273, conducting an audit of the juvenile rehabilitation system. This bill came to you from the Human Services Committee. This requires JLARC to audit juvenile rehabilitation. The 2-year total fund impact is $1.2 million, and the 4-year impact for general fund state is $1.7 million. There are no known amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6187 concerning the body scanner pilot program at the Department of Corrections. This bill came to you from the Human Services Policy Committee. It removes the language, the pilot and sunset language for the body scanners. The 2-year total fund impact is $7.8 million. The 4-year general fund state impact is $23.3 million. Again, the governor's budget included one-time funding in fiscal '25 of $7.5 million. There is one amendment. Amendment 21 in your EBB is offered by Senator Saldana that clarifies the Department of Health's authority to adopt rules for the use of body scanners in correctional facilities. There is no anticipated change in fiscal impact given the amendment. Senate Bill 6242 concerning law enforcement training. This removes the requirement for law enforcement agencies to pay the Criminal Justice Training Commission the 25% cost share towards training. The 2-year total fund impact is $4.4 million. The 4-year general fund state impact is $4.4 million. There are no known amendments. Senate Bill 6301 relating to Basic Law Enforcement Academy allows the Criminal Justice Training Commission to accept donated money or properties that would go to fund a Basic Law Enforcement Academy class. There is no fiscal impact. There is one amendment. Amendment number 22 is offered by Senator Hasegawa. This prohibits a donor who makes a donation from having influence over commission policy decisions or curricula. There is no expected impact to fiscal costs from this amendment.
Go ahead.
The next bill, Senate Bill 5811, this bill expands the list of family members who are exempt from the home care aid certification requirements by clarifying that the relationship to the client may exist through marriage or domestic partnership. It also removes the exemption from continuing education requirements that was put in place in the 2023 session for certain family members. The Department of Health, for turning to fiscal, the Department of Health estimates $29,000 in one-time cost to the general fund in the 23-25 biennium. DSHS has submitted an indeterminate fiscal note. However, for the component of the bill that removes the exemption that was put in place for continuing education, using estimates from DSHS that were contained in the fiscal note from the bill that implemented that exemption last year, costs are approximately $450,000 to the general fund per year, $800,000 per year in total funds. There is one amendment. Amendment number 23 is offered by Senator Braun. This amendment restores the exemption for certain family members to complete the 12 hours of continuing education each year. So savings with this amendment are approximately $450,000 per year to the general fund and $800,000 per year in total funds. The next bill is Senate Bill 5802. This bill removes language associated with the discontinued data source that is being used for case mix adjustments for nursing facility rates. It also eliminates language that specifies how the discontinued data source is to be used for calculating case mix adjustments, and it adds new language that requires DSHS to establish a method for applying case mix to the rates and to implement rules to that effect. The fiscal note that DSHS has submitted is indeterminate. However, case mix changes will impact the level at which adjustments are made to the direct care rates that are paid to providers, with funding levels remaining a decision of the legislature. The governor does include funding in his budget proposal of $6.6 million in total for fiscal year 25 for a 2.5% cap on the impact to this adjustment. And costs in the outlook for his proposal are estimated at $6.1 million to the general fund. There is one amendment offered by Senator Robinson, amendment number 24. This amendment makes case mix adjustments using the methodology developed by DSHS subject to appropriation.
The next bill is Substitute Senate Bill 6068, Dependency Outcome Reporting. You heard this, the Administrative Office of the Courts, known as AOC, is mandated to report on dependency cases that fail to meet statutory guidelines to achieve permanency. 6068 expands upon this requirement to include relational permanency and child well-being. The total four-year impact is $619,000. There is an amendment, number 25, offered by Senator Benke, which you also heard at the public hearing. The amendment mirrors House Bill 2383, removing the first component of the bill, Section 2, and modifying the requirements, Section 4. The amendment is not expected to change the fiscal impact.
Seeing no questions, go ahead.
Substitute Senate Bill 5774, increasing the capacity to conduct timely fingerprint-based background checks for prospective child care employees and other programs. This requires DCYF to maintain capacity to conduct fingerprints in at least 10 DCYF offices. The bill is subject to appropriation with a four-year fiscal impact of $726,000, assuming 10 offices. There are no amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 5908, providing extended foster care services to youth 18 to 21. 5908 makes a number of program and process changes aimed at increasing the EFC uptake rate. 5908 also expands financial support for extended foster care, known as EFC youth, by providing a supervised independent living stipend, subject to appropriation, and also providing an incentive payment for youth who choose to participate in employment training or educational activities, also subject to appropriation. A fiscal note was not available for the public hearing, but there's a partial fiscal note available now. DCYF states an indeterminate impact due to the supervised independent living stipend and incentive payment being subject to appropriation, and due to an unknown uptake rate resulting from the EFC eligibility changes, and also the uptake rate would be dependent on the level of the subsidy incentive payment as well. Impacts to other agencies like the Office of Attorney General and DSHS is not yet submitted. There is an amendment, proposed second substitute 26, offered by Senator Wynn. First, the amendment removes the requirement to provide the supervised independent subsidy within 1 week of signing an EFC or voluntary placement agreement. For context, DCYF stated in the fiscal note that their payment system cannot process a payment in less than 10 days. Next, the amendment modifies the incentive payment, which is subject to appropriation in the current bill. The amendment mandates the incentive payment to be developed in consultation with community-based organizations and with EFC youth. This incentive payment is to be implemented July 1, 2025. Substitute Senate Bill
Senator Wilson.
So there was a third point, so thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a third point there about qualifying activities in relation to RCW 7413-031. Could you give me an example without looking up RCW 7413, what a qualified activity would be?
I believe the qualifying activities involves employment training or educational activities approved by the agency and would be in line with the federal requirement. Allison, do you have I'll turn this over to my policy counterpoint, Allison.
Hi. It would be school, readiness for school, or working up to 80 hours per month, or have medical documentation that you can't participate in any of those activities.
Go ahead.
Okay. Substitute Senate Bill 6109, supporting children and families. 6109 has two parts. Part 1 clarifies the imminent physical harm removal standard, while also providing clarity regarding the authorization of law enforcement and medical administrators to remove or detain a child. Part 1 establishes an endangerment standard as relates to the presence of high potency synthetic opioids. Part 2 provides various resources for families, DCYF, and the courts. A fiscal note was not available at the public hearing, while a partial fiscal note is now available. The Administrative Office of the Courts estimates $470,000 per year for the new training requirements. The Office of Public Defense states an indeterminate impact as relates to Part 1 with an illustrative estimate of $1.1 million per year due to changes to the removal standard. And cites Section 2 as also generating an indeterminate impact as relates to the Section 207 and Section 210. There's also a minor fiscal impact at the Attorney General's office. DCYF, on the other hand, states an indeterminate impact as well. This includes Section 1, as it is unknown how the new standard would impact intakes and dependency actions. Part 2 is also predominantly indeterminate, with the 4 pilot programs, which are each subject to appropriation, totaling $6 million per year in the governor's budget. The legal liaison positions, also subject to appropriation, total $472,000 per year. And the second training individual accompanying DCYF caseworker provision totals $826,000 per year and 6 FTEs. The second, and a fiscal note is not yet available from Commerce or HCA. Therefore, the total fiscal 4-year fiscal impact is 4.7 million NGFO outside of DCYF, while also noting that Commerce and HCA costs are not yet known, and OPD states indeterminate impact, while the fiscal impact of DCYF is $826,000 per year for the caseworker support, plus $6.6 million per year indeterminate for the various subject appropriation provisions. There are 4 amendments. First, proposed second substitute number 27, offered by Senator Gildon. Number 27 modifies the removal standard in Part 1 and adds a new section to Part 2. Regarding Part 1, the proposed sub is in alignment, general alignment with the abuse and neglect standard in substitute House Bill 2447, which would remove the endangerment standard from the bill and includes high potency synthetic opioids in a list of what may establish abuse or neglect, while also requiring that a court give great weight to the lethality of and public health guidance high potency synthetic opioids. Regarding Section 2, the proposed sub adds a new section that provides DCYF the authority to refer parents to voluntary services that may be eligible if those services are offered within 60 days of being screened out. The fiscal impact is unknown. The standard in Part 1 in both substitute House Bill 2447 and in substitute Senate Bill 6109 are both cited as indeterminate, so it is difficult to say what the difference in cost would be there. Next, there is number 2, striking amendment number 28 is offered by Senator Nguyen. Like proposed second substitute 27 offered by Senator Gildon, striking amendment 28 modifies the Part 1 abuse and neglect standard to include high potency synthetic opioids and requires courts to give great weight to the same. Regarding Section 2, striking Amendment 28 removes 3 sections of the bill, the child care worker definition in Section 203, the second trained individual provision in Section 204, and the pilot program that connects pregnant women with SUD treatment in Section 209. Amendment 28 also modifies 3 sections of Part 2, the training requirement in Section 202 by adding an element to that, the public health nurse support for child care workers in Section 208 is modified by removing the reference to public health nurses and instead requiring DCYF to establish a program to provide support to child welfare workers. And finally, the 4 legal liaison requirements in Section 210 is modified from 4 positions to 1 position per region, which would represent an increase. The impact to these modifications would be to increase costs for the legal liaisons from $472,000 per year to approximately $700,000 per year for adding 2 positions. Lastly, striking Amendment 28 adds 4 new sections to the bill, a requirement that AOC collaborate with DCYF and DOH and a statewide organization to develop training and making that training available to DCYF and dependency court professionals, a requirement that HCA expand prenatal substance exposure services, this is subject to appropriation, establishing 2 pilot programs for DCYF for in-home parenting services support through July 2026, and requiring DOH to establish 2 pilots with liaisons that connect the community with health and social service organizations. This is subject to appropriation. The addition of the 4 sections would increase the fiscal impact, but the impact is unknown. There's a third amendment, Amendment 29, is also offered by Senator Nguyen and would amend striking Amendment 28, which I just described. Amendment 29 would remove 7 sections from the bill and add 1 section. The removals would be safety plan participants, Section 201, child welfare worker definition, Section 203, the second trained accompanying individuals provision, Section 204, referral of pregnant women with substance abuse disorder, Section 207, the public health nurse support for CPS workers, Section 208, and the pregnant person substance use disorder program, Section 209. Amendment 29 also adds 1 provision to the bill, the AOC requirement to develop training and make that training available to DCYF and dependency court professionals. Lastly, the Fourth Amendment, Amendment 30, is also offered by Senator Nguyen, and like Amendment 29, would amend the striking Amendment 28 and remove the same 6 sections from the bill that I just described, while adding the same 4 provisions that were found in Amendment 28.
Senator Kaiser.
Thank you, Josh. It's kind of confusing. Is the proposed second substitute amendment amended by Amendment 28, 29, and 30th, or does the striking amendment strike the proposed second substitute amendment?
Number 28, the striking amendment, is a striker to the substitute Senate Bill 6109. And then amendments 29 would amend the 28, the striker.
Part. Yeah, I got that part. So we've got basically 2 proposed subs, it looks like. Thank you.
Yes, Amendment 27 by Senator Gildon is not associated with the other 3.
Oh, sure, Senator Gildon.
So it looks like there's a lot going on here. So the proposed sub number 27, everything that's inside of it is covered by the amendment number 28. Am I correct in saying that? But 28 does a lot more, but it specifically covers amendment 27?
Yeah, so Amendment 28 doesn't have the addition of Part 2, which is in Amendment 27. So that's one variance. And then also the update to the change of standard removal in Part 1, there is a variance in how that's done between Section 20, or between Amendment 28 and 27. And Allison, would you be available to come up to describe that distinction?
Well, I would say 2 things. One is in your proposal, DCYF, or the courts would look at public health guidance from the CDC, and in the striker amendment number 28, the public health guidance would come from the Department of Health.
A couple minor differences. I think we're, okay, yes, please go on.
This one's less confusing. Substitute Senate Bill 6006. The next bill is supporting victims of human trafficking and sexual abuse. Part 1 adds victims of sex trafficking to the definition of abuse and neglect, and also requires DCYF and juvenile justice agencies to use a validate assessment tool to screen youth for sexual abuse. Part 1 also requires DCYF to make recommendations about types of services that would be needed to be offered to victims of sex trafficking. Part 2 adds commercial sexual exploitation as a basis to obtain a sexual assault protection order. Part 3 removes the time limit and other eligibility factors for the Crime Victims Compensation Program. Part 4 removes the statute of limitations for sex trafficking crimes. Part 6 establishes a date of January 1st, 2025 for implementation. The 4-year impact is $3.4 million determinate, with an additional $1.9 million indeterminate impact described in the fiscal note. There is a proposed second substitute, number 31, offered by Senator Dingra. In addition to the requirement that DCYF make recommendations regarding the types of services needed for dependent youth who are victims of sex trafficking, this amendment requires DCYF to assess and offer services to these youth, and allows DCYF to assess and provide services to the same category of youth whom are not found to be dependent. The amendment would not have a fiscal impact as relates to dependent youth because in the underlying cost estimate, DCYF already assumed they would be providing services to these dependent youth. The cost of the permissive expansion of assessment and services to non-dependent youth is unknown. Secondly,
excuse me, Josh, Senator Dingra.
Sorry, I can wait for him to finish to ask my question.
Okay.
Secondly, the amendment shifts the implementation date back 6 months from January 2025 to July 2025. This would reduce the fiscal impact by 1 to 2 million, while not wholly eliminating the stated 2.2 million fiscal year impact in fiscal year 2025, because DCYF indicated they would bring estimated staff on prior to implementation date for training purposes.
Go ahead, Senator Dingro.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. How much money does the state get from the federal government to do this work?
I believe it's 2.2 million to 2.3 million per year.
And that's based on us conforming to federal law, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
It's referred to as the CAPTA grant.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Substitute Senate Bill 5780, Public Defense and Prosecution, offered by Senator Torres. The bill would establish both a training and internship program for both public defense and prosecution. The bill is subject to appropriation and has a 4-year fiscal impact of $4.6 million. There is a proposed second substitute, number 33, offered by Senator Torres. Number 33 simply clarifies the subject to appropriation language and makes no other substantive changes to the proposed second substitute. All right.
Okay.
My last bill of the day, Senate Bill 5889, establishing the Customer Voice Council. Funding for this bill is in the governor's proposed budget, Senate Bill 5950. This is agency request legislation requiring DSHS to establish a statewide public assistance customer voice council. The 4-year fiscal impact is $419,000 NGFO. There are no amendments.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the briefing for bills in Group 2 for today. It's 12:10. We will take a lunch and caucus break. Democrats come to caucus at 12:45 or immediately following pro forma, whichever is sooner. Susan wants to make a quick comment, so please go ahead.
So for members of the committee, Josh has prepared a table on substitute Senate Bill 6109 that breaks out the difference by each of those amendments. We'll add it to the EBB. Okay.
And then a reminder that, let me get my notes here. The boards for packet 1 are over on the side, and make sure as you're leaving now to go to lunch, make sure if you haven't signed the board, make sure to sign the boards for packet 1 because they want to process them right away. I think that's 12:45 Democrats in caucus, and then we'll just be in touch about when we're back on the dais. 12:45 for Republicans as well? Caucus. Okay. Calling us back into executive session for the purpose of voting on bills in Group 2.
You all set?
Let me first say that we will not be taking action on Substitute Senate Bill 6021, Senate Bill 5981, and Substitute Senate Bill 6273. Start with Substitute Senate Bill 5953, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I move substitute Senate Bill 5953 concerning financial aid grants for incarcerated students receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that Substitute Senate Bill 5953 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved Substitute Senate Bill 5953 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam President, I move that substitute Senate Bill 5893, providing gate money to incarcerated individuals, receive a due pass recommendation, and also move Amendment 20.
Amendment 20 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No.
All in favor of adopting Amendment 20, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5893, and that second substitute Senate Bill 5893 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5893 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 5893 with a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6187 concerning the body scanner pilot program at the Department of Corrections receive a due pass recommendation. And I also move Amendment 21 by Senator Saldana.
Amendment 21 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting Amendment 21, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6187, and that second substitute Senate Bill 6187 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6187 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. I will just comment that it's our intention to, once again, limit this to a one-year extension and then come back next year and perhaps keep it going longer. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 6187 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6242 concerning law enforcement training receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6242 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you've moved Senate Bill 6242 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6301 concerning Basic Law Enforcement Academy receive a due pass recommendation. There is an amendment labeled 22 by Senator Hasegawa, and I move Amendment 22.
Amendment 22 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor of adopting the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment has been adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 6301, and that substitute Senate Bill 6301 receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6301 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6301 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5811 expanding the definition of family members for individual providers receive a due pass recommendation, and I move Amendment 23 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 23 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the amendment? Aye. All opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
So, Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5811 expanding the definition of family members for individual providers receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
Substitute Senate Bill 5811. It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5811 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Substitute Senate Bill 5811 has been sent to the Rules Committee with subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5802 providing flexibility in the calculations of nursing rates receive a due pass recommendation, and I move Amendment 24 by Senator Robinson.
Amendment 24 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
She said substitute. Okay. I checked it right.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 5802, and that substitute Senate Bill 5802 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5802 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5802 is moving to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6068, reporting on dependency outcomes, receive a due pass recommendation, and I move Amendment 25 by Senator Banky.
Amendment 25 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of adopting the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6068, and that second substitute Senate Bill 6068 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6068 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6068 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5774, increasing the capacity to conduct fingerprint-based background checks for prospective child care employees, receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5774 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5774 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5908, providing extended foster care services to youth ages 18 to 21, receive a due pass recommendation. And I move the proposed second substitute 26 by me, Senator Nguyen.
Proposed second substitute 26 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The proposed second substitute is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5908 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5908 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5908 is being sent to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6109, supporting children and families with a due pass recommendation. There is a proposed second substitute 27 by Senator Gildon, so I move the proposed second substitute labeled 27.
Proposed second substitute 27 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Sure.
Senator Gildon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a lot going on with this bill and all of the amendments, so I think we need to just kind of clarify. So while we were caucusing, I was able to verify the differences between my proposed sub and Senator Nguyen's amendment that'll be coming up in just a moment. And one of the biggest differences, there's really two big differences and then a third smaller one, but one of the biggest differences is there's a section that says when deciding about removal of a child, the court must determine if there's a parent present. My amendment applies the great weight language, saying that the courts must place great weight on the presence of synthetic opioids whenever that they're making that determination if a parent's present. So it's not just a parent is there. If the parent is suffering from SUD, then I think the court should place great weight on the presence of synthetic opioids in the home. Senator Nguyen's amendment does not put that great weight language in that particular section. The second part of it is my amendment requires us to refer to CDC data and information which takes a holistic look at the lethality of these synthetic opioids. whereas Senator Wynn's amendment says that we need to look to the Department of Health for that guidance, but evidently the Department of Health has public health data for adults, but not for children. They don't offer any of the guidance for children. And I think that's why that the agency wanted to have the CDC as the organization that we look to for that guidance. And so those are kind of the two main differences as I understand them, and I would appreciate your support for this proposed sub.
And then if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and speak. I'm going to urge a no vote at this time on the proposed sub. Obviously, there's another one coming out as well. I think part of the conversations that we'll have, this is a very tricky topic that we're going to face. So the proposed striking amendment that I have is carefully crafted with some of the advocates, with the agencies and folks involved in this system as well. So they're trying to find a very narrow path for us to be able to help these young people in times of need, but also ensure that we don't necessarily have undue harm on accident as well. So urging a no vote at this time.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the proposed amendment, second substitute 27, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment, the second substitute 27 fails.
Madam Chair, I move striking Amendment 28 by Senator Wynn.
Striking Amendment 28 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Because there's amendments to the amendment.
Oh, we have to perfect, yeah, go ahead.
And then, Madam Chair, there is Amendment 29 to the striking amendment. I'm going to go ahead and pull that amendment. And then I'll move Amendment 30 to the striking amendment by Senator Wynn.
Amendment 30 to striking Amendment 28 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about Amendment 30?
Yes, Madam Chair, briefly, obviously, this crisis is upon us right now. There's a number of services that we can try to deploy to help alleviate the concerns that are being had within our homes. So Amendment 30 essentially provides a suite of services that the agency can potentially use to help these families and ensure that our young people are getting the supports that they need.
Any further discussion? All in favor of adopting Amendment 30 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 30 is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into a second substitute Senate Bill 610.
I think we have to adopt your striking amendment.
You're right. Yep.
We are now moving striking amendment. Does it change? It's still called striking amendment 28?
Yeah, just perfect the amendment. I think you can roll them all into the proposed sub.
But we haven't adopted the striking amendment 28, I think, is the...
I think you can roll the striking amendment as perfected into the proposed substitute.
Okay.
So I'll just go. So then I would move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6109. Is that right? Okay. And that second substitute Senate Bill 6109 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Yeah, I do feel like we've missed the striking.
Yeah. Let's go back and striking amendment 28 as amended. And it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adopting a striking amendment 28 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Striking amendment is adopted.
And then now I'll go ahead and move that the amendment be rolled to second substitute Senate Bill 6109, and that second substitute Senate Bill 6109 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6109 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved second substitute Senate Bill 6109 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6006, supporting victims of human trafficking and sexual abuse, receive a due pass recommendation And I move the proposed substitute, I remove proposed second substitute 31 by Senator Dingra.
Proposed second substitute 31 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 31 is adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 6006 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6006 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6006 has been sent to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5780, encouraging participation in public defense and prosecution professions, receive a due pass recommendation. And I see that the proposed second substitute 32 is withdrawn, so I'll move to propose second substitute 33 by Senator Torres.
Proposed second substitute 33 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 33 is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that second substitute Senate Bill 5780 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5780 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5780 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 5889, establishing the Customer Voice Council, receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5889 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 5889 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures. Okay. We are ready for briefing on Group 3.
Senate Bill 6247 allows members of PERS Plan 2, a member of PERS Plan 2 that's on an authorized unpaid leave of absence to serve as an elected official of a labor organization to continue to earn service credits towards their pension benefit. The fiscal note has not been published, but it is expected to be minimal, and there are no amendments. Moving to substitute Senate Bill 5924, which requires employers provide employees and former employees with certain personnel records. There's a partial fiscal note showing just over $1.2 million in the 23-25 biennium from all state funds and $2.7 million over the 4-year outlook. There are 3 amendments by Senator Kaiser, starting with number 34, which removes medical records from the records that must be included in a personnel file. Amendment 35 adds that the requirements to provide personnel records and discharge statements may not be construed to supersede state or federal law. Amendment 36 provides that if the employer provides the complete requested documents within 5 calendar days of receiving notice of intent to sue from an employee, that no action may be commenced against the employer based on the previous failure to provide the documents. The fiscal impact of those is unknown. Moving to substitute Senate Bill 6194, which modifies legislative employee collective bargaining. There's a fiscal note showing one-time costs of $34,000. There's one amendment by Senator Kaiser, Amendment 37, which does 2 things. First, it fixes grammatical errors, and the second is it provides for the purposes of the exception to certain ethics restrictions for third-party lobbying on behalf of legislative employees, that the lobbying must concern legislation that directly impacts legislative workplace conditions rather than legislative employee collective bargaining. And it removes a provision specifying that the exemption for third-party lobbying applies regardless of whether the employee is part of an employee organization. And I do not expect this to change the cost. Moving to Senate Bill 6125, which directs the University of Washington Institute on Human Development and Disabilities, DSHS, the State Archives, and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to organize, catalog, and store historical documents and artifacts identified at Lakeland Village. There's a fiscal note showing total state costs of $716,000 in the 23-25 biennium and $1.4 million over the 4-year outlook. There is one proposed sub by Senator Wynn, number 38, which changes the requirement to do the work to one, to create a preservation plan to organize, catalog, and store historical documents and artifacts. It provides that the preservation plan detail how the records and artifacts will be cataloged, preserved, and the extent allowable under federal and state law. It specifies that the plan must also include how the records will be cataloged, digitized, and transferred to archival microfilm for long-term access. It removes the requirement that all the records and artifacts undergo an initial historic review and documentation of materials. It requires the state archives and DSHS to work together in storing and retaining the records, and provide that no records may be destroyed until after the preservation plan is completed and the work is funded during the 26th fiscal year. And it adds an expiration date of June 30th of 2026, which would be after the work in this substitute would be completed. I anticipate the fiscal impact to go down for the Secretary of State and possibly for the other agencies as well, at least in the short term until the work is commenced. Moving to Senate Bill 5373 from the 2023 legislative session. This bill requires health carriers to reimburse advanced registered nurse practitioners and physician's assistants at the same rate as physicians for providing the same service in the same area for plans that are renewed on or after January 1st of 2024. And by January 1st of 2025, the Office of the Insurance Commissioner is directed to report to the legislature on changes in the rates as a result of this act. There's a partly indeterminate fiscal note showing $104,000 in the current biennium from non-GFS sources and indeterminate costs that are related to possible impacts under the Uniform Medical Plan available to public employees of approximately $3.6 million per year for PEB and $2.7 million per year for SEB. There's one proposed substitute, number 39 by Senator Robinson, which makes technical language changes to facilitate the Office of the Insurance Commissioner's implementation, including it changes the word contracted to participating provider. It changes insurer to health carrier, and it removes the reference to allowed amount, replacing it with the amount of compensation the carrier would pay. It also moves all the dates forward 1 year, and it is not expected to change the cost.
Senator Mullet has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda, can you repeat the PEB and SEB fiscal information? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so what would happen is it would increase the cost to the Uniform Medical Plan, which is one of the plans. It's the self-insured plan available to employees. And it would be approximately $3.6 million per year in PEB and $2.7 million for SEB.
Thank you. Go ahead. Amanda, you can proceed to the next bill.
That was the last bill for me.
Oh.
Moving to the next bill, SB 5825. This bill comes to you from Law and Justice Committee, which makes various changes to the Uniform Guardianship Act. The bill also directs the Office of Public Guardianship to start a pilot program to provide services for individuals who are currently receiving care in a hospital setting who are ready to discharge. The fiscal note indicated $594,000 general fund state for fiscal 25 and about $1.8 million over the 4-year outlook period. There are also indeterminate costs for the pilot program, costing up to $1.5 million annually. The pilot program is subject to appropriation. There are 2 proposed second substitutes in your EBB, both sponsored by Senator Peterson. The first one, number 40, is a version you heard in this committee. It makes several changes, including amending the pilot program to apply to appointment of decision makers rather than guardian. I don't expect that the numbers in the fiscal note would be impacted by those changes. Again, the cost of the pilot program is indeterminate and subject to appropriation. The next one, proposed second substitute for number 41, makes 2 additional changes on top of the last proposed second substitute, which are requirements for court visitors in conservatorship proceedings. There is also no fiscal impact for the additional changes. Moving to the next bill, Senate Bill 6038, an act relating to reducing child care provider cost. The bill expands the business and occupation tax exemption for child care services to children up to age 12 and eliminates child care licensing fee. The fiscal note was updated since the last hearing. The expanded B&O exemption would decrease the state revenue by $500,000 in fiscal 25 and $1.6 million over the 4-year period. The elimination of license fees would decrease state revenue by $51,000 annually. The expenditure is $84,000 total funds over the 4-year, mainly for DOR's administrative costs and for JLAC to review the tax preference. There is a proposed substitute number 42, sponsored by Senator Wellman. The substitute makes the following changes. It first expands the tax exemption to include the care of children up to age 18 who have a verified special need or are under court supervision. It makes the exemption permanent and removes the requirement for the JLAC review. It also changes the effective date from July 1st, 2024 to October 1st, 2024. For the fiscal impact, as the substitute expands the B&O exemption, the revenue impact would be larger, but to a relatively small scale. I don't have a number, though. The substitute also removes the expenditure for JLAC. There is another amendment, number 43, to the proposed substitute, sponsored by Senator Robinson, which takes out the sections related to eliminating the child care license fee. As a result, the revenue loss for DCYF about the license fee, $51,000 annually, was also removed. Moving to next bill, Senate Bill 6238, which modifies the income threshold and assistance amount for the Property Tax Assistance Program for widows and widowers of veterans. The fiscal note shows no fiscal impact, as the agency could absorb the cost if there's any. There is no amendment.
Okay, Senate Bill 5770 relates to property tax reform. The committee heard a proposed substitute. This is S3775.4, number 44 in the electronic bill book. As a quick recap, the proposed substitute does 4 things. It increases the property tax revenue limit for local property taxes from 1% to 3%. It exempts property owners qualifying under the Retired Persons Property Tax Relief Program from 25% of Part 1 of the state levy. It eliminates non-supplant restrictions applicable to taxing districts in King County, and then it modifies provisions with respect to a county hospital levy. The proposed substitute is estimated to decrease state revenues by $12.6 million over the 4-year period due to expanding the senior property tax exemption. Modifying the property tax growth limit for local governments is estimated to increase local revenues in calendar year 25 by $118 million, $200 million in calendar year 26, and $299 million in calendar year 27. The 4-year expenditure impact to DOR is estimated to be just under $150,000. There are 4 amendments to the proposed substitute. The first one, amendment number 45. This is S4760.1 by Senator Braun. It removes all provisions of the proposed substitute except Part 4 relating to county property tax funding for hospitals. The next amendment, amendment number 46, this is S4590.2, offered by Senator Wilson. It requires JLARC to evaluate the potential impacts of a change to the property tax revenue growth limit on households, including renters, by income decile, and submit a report to the legislature by November 1st, 2024. And then it makes the changes to the property tax revenue growth limit contingent on JLARC concluding that low-income households would not use a larger percentage of their household income to pay for increased property taxes. The next amendment, amendment number 47, this is S4591.3, offered by Senator Gildon. It requires JLARC to conduct a racial equity analysis to determine the potential impacts of a change to the property tax revenue growth limit on various racial and ethnic populations and submit a report to the legislature by November 1st, 2024. And then again, it makes the changes to the property tax revenue growth limit contingent on JLARC concluding that no racial or ethnic population would use a higher and disproportionate percentage of its household income to pay for increased property taxes under the bill. And then the fourth and final amendment for this bill is amendment number 48. This is S4592.2, offered by Senator Braun. It requires cities and counties to reduce general sales and use taxes in an amount necessary to offset the estimated increase to property tax collections resulting from the change to the property tax growth limit in the proposed substitute. Okay, the next bill, substitute Senate Bill 6158. This is the bill that relates to public facilities districts. Again, it extends the authorization for 2 state-shared local sales and use taxes for regional centers from 40 years to 65 years, increases the statutory amounts for county public facilities district board of director compensation, and then expands the use by counties of certain PFD lodging tax revenues. While the bill would impact state revenues, the impact associated with extending the PFD tax credits are beyond the time frame of the fiscal note. As some context, again, in fiscal year 22, PFDs collected about $41 million from the tax credits. There are no amendments to this bill.
The next bill is Senate Bill 5911, which dedicates 1% of state sales tax collected during the month of October to the Andy Hill Cancer Research Endowment Fund Match Transfer Account. The bill reduces state revenue by about $13.3 million in the current biennium and $28.1 million in the 25-27 biennium. There are no expenditure impacts. There are 2 amendments. The first is a proposed substitute offered by Senator Wilson, amendment number 48. It clarifies that the calculation of sales tax to be deposited into the Andy Hill Cancer Research account must occur after calculating the amount of sales tax subject to tribal compacts, and makes several other technical changes. There is also an amendment to the proposed substitute offered by Senator Robinson. That's amendment number 50. It reduces the amount of sales tax collected in October and deposited into the Andy Hill Cancer Research account from 1% to 0.25%. A fiscal note is not ready for the bill as amended, but the amendment is likely to reduce the impact to state revenue from $14 million to about $3.5 million each fiscal year. There are no other amendments. The next bill is substitute Senate Bill 5118, which makes changes to the multifamily property tax exemption. There is no impact to state revenue. This would be a shift, and there are no expenditure impacts, and there are no amendments. Senate Bill 6013 expands the nonprofit housing development property tax exemption to include residences built as part of a mutual self-help housing program. There is no impact to state revenue. Again, this would be a shift. There are one-time expenditures of about $35,000 this biennium for Department of Revenue administrative costs, and there are no amendments. Senate Bill 6030 allows any county to offer the property tax exemption for accessory dwelling units rented as low-income housing rather than King County alone. The property tax exemption for ADUs expires January 1st, 2034. There is no impact to state revenue. This would be a shift. There are one-time expenditures of about $4,000, and there are no amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6175 creates a property tax exemption for commercial buildings converted into affordable housing and a sales and use tax exemption for materials and labor used in the conversion of those buildings. The property tax exemption does not impact state revenue. It would be a shift. The impact to state revenue for the sales and use tax exemption is indeterminate because it is unknown which or how many cities will offer the new exemption program. The estimated 4-year expenditure impact is about $1.3 million. There is a proposed substitute offered by Senator Billig, number 51. It removes the property tax exemption for conversions of commercial buildings to affordable housing. It replaces the sales and use tax exemption for materials and labor used to convert commercial buildings to affordable housing, and instead establishes a new retail sales and use tax deferral program for the construction of underutilized commercial property to affordable housing. The program defers all state and local taxes for a period of 10 years. If the owner maintains the property as affordable housing for the 10-year period, then deferred taxes must not be repaid. Recipients must rent or sell at least 20% of the housing units as affordable housing to very low or moderate income households, and at least 50% of the multifamily housing units must be rented at or below fair market rent for the county or sold at a price at or below the county median price. The proposed substitute also specifies that a recipient of the sales and use tax deferral may also qualify for the multi-property tax exemption. No deferrals may be approved on or after June 30th, 2034. The proposed substitute includes a tax preference performance statement and requires a joint legislative audit and review committee to complete its review by December 31st, 2032. And last, it amends the title and intent section. Fiscal note is not available for the proposed second substitute. However, the impact to revenue is likely still indeterminate because it's unknown which cities will offer the program. There are no other amendments. And last, Senate Bill 6215 makes a number of technical and administrative changes to the state tax and licensing laws as recommended by the Department of Revenue. There is no impact to state revenue. There are one-time expenditures of $4,000 this biennium, and there are no amendments.
Thank you. I believe that ends the briefing for packet number 3. Make sure that you sign boards if you didn't for packet number 2 as you leave for caucus. And we will break for caucus now and come back when we're ready. We're coming back into executive session for the purpose of voting on bills in group number 3 on the agenda. And I'll start by saying that we will not be taking action on Substitute Senate Bill 5924, Senate Bill 5373, Substitute Senate Bill 6185, and Substitute Senate Bill 5118. I might have transposed numbers, sorry. 6158. Okay, back to the top. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move Senate Bill 6247, Public Employees Retirement System Plan 2, Service Credits for Officers of Labor Organizations receive a due pass recommendation, resent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6247 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. I was going to ask for discussion, and it looks like Senator Schessler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is totally a pension bill, and it's been the policy of the legislature to take recommendations from the Pension Policy Committee that I served on for many, many years, along with Senator Conway and Braun. And this bill should have gone through pension policy before it became to Ways and Means, let alone the entire body. I'll be voting no because there is a process for pension bills.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senate Bill 6247. By your vote, you've moved Senate Bill 6247 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6194 concerning state legislative employee collective bargaining receive a due pass recommendation. And I move Amendment 37 by Senator Kaiser.
Amendment 37 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Senator Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a somewhat technical amendment dealing with aligning our ethics rules for legislative employees.
Any further discussion? All in favor of adopting Amendment 37, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6194, and that second substitute Senate Bill 6194 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6194 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6194 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6125, Lakeland Village Records, receive a due pass recommendation, and I move the proposed substitute 38 by Senator Nguyen.
Proposed substitute 38 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Substitute is adopted.
I move that the substitute Senate Bill 6125 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6125 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6125 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5825 concerning guardianship and conservatorship receive a due pass recommendation. And I'd move, there is a proposed second substitute 40, which is withdrawn, so I'm going to go ahead and move the proposed second substitute 41 by Senator Peterson.
Proposed second substitute 41 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of proposed second substitute 41, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The substitute is adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5825 receive a due pass recommendation to be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5825 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5825 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6038, reducing the costs associated with providing child care, receive a due pass recommendation. I also move the proposed substitute 42 by Senator Wellman, but there is an amendment, so I move the amendment 43 by Senator Robinson.
I'd like to withdraw Amendment 43. So we have proposed.
So I move the proposed substitute 42 by Senator Wellman.
Proposed substitute 42 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I will just say that this proposed substitute removes the JLARC study that we typically use for tax exemptions. So we expect on the floor to put the JLARC back and limit the tax exemption to 10 years, as is customary here. But for today, I would recommend yes on the proposed substitute.
All those in favor?
Is that right?
Yep.
So all those in favor of proposed substitute 42, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The substitute is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the substitute Senate Bill 6038 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6038 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Substitute Senate Bill 6038 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6238, updating thresholds for the property tax exemptions for widows and widowers of honorably discharged veterans, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6238 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6238 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that the proposed substitute Senate Bill 5770, providing state and local property tax reform, receive a due pass recommendation. There are a number of amendments, so I move Amendment 45 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 45 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I withdraw Amendment 45.
Thank you. I move Amendment 46 by Senator Wilson.
Amendment 46 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so this amendment is actually requiring JLARC to do an evaluation of the impacts that the property tax will have on households with limited incomes. That's renters and those that are on a fixed income. We know that these property taxes are affecting these people exponentially more. I get emails all the time from people who are now telling me that their property tax bill is higher than their mortgage bill and or their rent. And so I really feel like that's what we need to do. It's regressive tax, and I think that we need to be looking at that, and then we would act upon what the JLARC study would tell us in that case. So I would appreciate a yes.
Thank you. Senator Peterson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would recommend a no on the amendment. I think we will continue to study the effects of property taxes on folks, and I think everybody would be excited to see some progressive reform to our tax system. But in the meantime, in the interest of public safety and all the other important things that our local governments do, I think it's time for them to have some more flexibility about what they choose to do with property tax increases. So urge a no. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator Wagoner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking in support of the amendment, after you've already lost your home because of property taxes, it's a little bit late to go back and do the study on the effects. You're not getting your home back, so I urge support.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Amendment 46, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 47 by Senator Gildon.
Amendment 47 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Gildon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a hefty thing that we're talking about today, and I think, you know, certainly raising property taxes can exacerbate disparities and disproportionately affect minority communities, and many of those minority families are already facing real financial challenges, and an increase in property taxes can certainly further strain their budgets. We all talk about regressive taxes in Washington, and we know that this regressive tax policy can lead to housing insecurity and even potentially displacement for minority communities who are just right now struggling to keep up with higher tax bills, and it's ultimately going to widen the wealth gap. And we need to have a lot of empathy and understanding. I think it's crucial to have that in mind when you're shaping policies. And it's incumbent on us to stand in solidarity with those minority communities and push for tax reforms that promote inclusivity and economic stability for everyone. I believe this policy will certainly cause the most harm to minorities across our state. But I want to use real data. I want to make decisions based on fact, and that's the point of this amendment is let's study this. Let's see what the impact on our minority communities is going to be before enacting it, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask for a no on this amendment. I think that there was general excitement within our caucus to have interest from Senator Gildon and others in doing racial equity analysis, and look forward to working with him on that in this policy and in others. I suspect maybe the uniformity clause in the Constitution is the greater problem in terms of progressive application of the property tax. But in the meantime, as I said before, I think that there's also, as we have learned over the last 20-some years, disproportionate effect in terms of the services that local governments are not able to provide as a result of having their revenue constrained. And so would urge no. Thank you.
Senator Wagoner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may recall that we had a tax structure work group that did about 2 years of work on this. Part of this work has already been done, and it emphasized, I'd like to emphasize that minorities were far and above against a property tax. We got that in the initial data, so I think this deserves further study, and we ought to get the horse before the cart before we go forward. So urge support for the amendment.
Thank you. All those in favor of Amendment 47, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 48 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 48 has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess if we're not going to study this policy before for its effect on regressivity in our tax system, perhaps we could just get on with making our tax system less regressive. And what this amendment does is says if you're going to use the higher growth rate for your property tax, then you have to offset that by a reduction in sales tax. And I think one of the things we agree on across the political spectrum here is that sales tax is regressive. We know sales tax is high, especially in many of our urban areas. And what some of you may not know is, contrary to some of the testimony we heard on this bill, sales tax is actually across the state, sales tax has grown over the last 5 years, so it's equal with the level of funding that comes from property tax. In fact, in King County, they now receive more money from sales tax than from property tax. And we know, I think for certain that sales tax is regressive. So here's a chance to, if we're not going to study, just to get on with making our property tax system, our tax system more progressive. And I would encourage your support.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate the interest in progressive tax reform. What I'll say is that the main purpose of the bill is to help local governments through the democratic process be able to make a choice to have additional resources, not just to change where the inadequate resources that they have are coming from. So I would urge a no on the amendment. Thank you. Senator
Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just forgot to mention this also would not require a change to the uniformity clause in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you for that. Discussion. Those in favor of Amendment 48, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move that the proposed substitute Senate Bill 5770, providing state and local property tax reform, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5770 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Senator Braun.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't expecting to get this opportunity to speak quite so quickly, but I am going to encourage a no on this bill. I want to remind folks of a number of things. One, this restriction on the growth in property tax came into being with an initiative overwhelmingly passed across our state. They reduced it to 1%. Of course, as you know, the state Supreme Court found that unconstitutional, but then the legislature came right back in and put it in place. It's been in place for almost 2 decades, and folks have been concerned about this for a number of years. But when you actually look at the growth rate in county budgets, in city budgets, you see that they grow pretty much the same as the operating budget. We know over the last, I think it's 5 years I have here, that the county budgets have grown by 44%. That's the total tax. You know, that compares to a median income growth. I'm sorry, that's over 5 years. Median income growth. Let me talk over 10 years. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. 10 years, 82%. Median income growth in that time, 44%. So almost twice the growth of median income. If you compare it to CPI, is 35%. Not quite 3 times the rate of inflation. IPD is 22%, almost 4 times that rate of inflation. So I don't think we're seeing a slowdown in growth in county budgets. In fact, if anything, just the opposite. They're growing well in excess of personal income growth, of inflation under a couple different measures. So I don't believe it's an issue of not having enough money. It's a matter of prioritizing. And we've heard a discussion about more investment in public safety, and I think everybody here today would support that. But that's a matter of priorities. We have the revenue growth to invest in public safety. We just have to be willing to do it. So I don't think stepping past the will of the people to allow increased growth in property taxes is the way to do it. We just need to focus on what our priorities and invest in those with the funding we have, which I will remind you has grown at twice the rate of the income growth by everybody else in the state. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Wilson.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think back again, Senator Wagner mentioned the tax structure work group that we spent a lot of money and we spent a lot of time in that work group coming up with decisions that I feel like we should be listening to. I don't understand why we would want to keep spending this kind of money and then not taking the sorry, the recommendations that come from these groups. And I guess, although they went in saying that it had to be a net zero, so in order to look at all the tax reforms we might do. But we can't keep talking about how regressive our tax system is and then continue to make it more regressive before we make it progressive. So I think you've got to think about these things. I mean, revenues from government right now are growing far faster than any wages that are out there, and our property taxes, I mean, in the last few years, properties values have skyrocketed, which of course increases property taxes just because housing is more and more scarce, which increases the cost of housing, which then increases the cost of the property tax. So they've been hit hard a lot in the last several years for property taxes, and I'm hearing from my constituents every day. So I really think we need to be reconsidering. This is not the time to be raising property taxes on our people. Thank you.
Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When all you've got's a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and all this is going to do is give local government a bigger hammer. And we have a choice to give them a different tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if this passes and local government executes it because that's the only thing they've got, the only tool they've got, there's so much property tax fatigue out there that you will never pass another school bond or levy or public safety bond. The voters aren't going to have it. So we're really doing great harm here when we have the potential to do good and give local government another tool. I've talked about returning the liquor revenue that the state took in 2012, doubling the marijuana revenue and returning that to government. We could feel a little pinch here in our budget to do a lot of good for local government and avoid what I think is a certainty. This gets passed. It gets executed by local government because they don't have any other way to increase revenue. And then our schools, our public safety, all the other taxing authorities in local government are never going to be able to pass another source of funds. So I think this is a dangerous bill. I hope that we kill it.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I guess I first wanted to respond to the suggestion that we are ignoring or somehow running roughshod over the work that the tax structure work group did. And I guess I'll direct people's attention to pages 16 and 18 of the final report, which recommends doing exactly this and increasing the growth limit for local governments. The bill no longer, with the substitute adopted, the bill no longer does that for the state, which I personally think is unfortunate, but that's the nature of the process. I think we're not going to be finished with our work to try to improve the tax system, but the reality is that my county and many counties where, frankly, people will support increased property taxes as the right balance in terms of the services that local governments can provide, have been crying out for years for this authority, and particularly because of the non-supplant that is also removed in this bill that is unique to King County. We have been in a real pickle for our local government. So I urge your support, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill.
Senator Gildon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think a lot of people are confused about this, perhaps. So the bill that we're considering would raise the cap at which property taxes can grow from 1%, as is now, to 3%. So it's basically a tripling. But that's not the only factor that's considered whenever you're evaluating property taxes, because it's 1% plus the cost of new construction. So, and we've seen a boom of new construction, especially in Seattle and areas like that. So if I look back historically, over the last 10 years, statewide, property taxes have risen by an average of 4.67% each year. If I look just at King County, property taxes have risen by 7.84% year after year over the last 10 years. And I have to ask myself, is the narrative that we can only raise the taxes by 1% per year accurate? And no, obviously it's not accurate, because they're going up by over 7% in King County and 4.67% statewide. Property taxes are growing rapidly, and honestly, people in my district, and I'm certain people in other districts, they've had enough. They're done with it, and they want us to vote no on this. Thank you.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick note. One thing that I don't think has been mentioned here this afternoon is the size of this tax increase. Now, of course, it depends on what the local governments do with this new authority. But if they execute it, this ends up being about a $6 billion tax increase over the next 10 years, which isn't the worst news. Actually, the worst news is that it's compounding, which means it gets more and more each year. So when you take this out past 10 years, you get close to $1 billion of additional tax each year after that, if it's fully implemented. This is a very large new tax once fully implemented and rolled out over a few years. The compounding effect of a 3% over and over really makes a big difference to the tax rate to individual taxpayers. And if you put it in context, we all are familiar with some of the concerns that were raised about the long-term care tax. It's about at the time those concerns were raised, it was about $1 billion a year. This has the capacity to be 5 or 6 times larger than that over time, with virtually no additional action from the legislature. It's just going to happen. I can't imagine, given the people of the state of Washington's concern about property tax, its impact on homeowners and on renters, that there's not going to be outrage over this if the legislature proceeds on this course. So I would encourage a no vote on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of substitute Senate Bill 5770, please say yes. Aye. Opposed? No. By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 5770 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5911, cancer research funding, receive a due pass recommendation. And there is a proposed sub, so I move the proposed substitute 49 by Senator Wilson. And there's an amendment to that proposed sub, so I move Amendment 50 by Senator Robinson.
Amendment 50 to the proposed sub has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 5911, and that substitute Senate Bill 5911 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5911 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5911 has moved to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5118, modifying the I'm sorry, just joking. Move Senate Bill 6013, home ownership development property tax exemption, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6013 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6013 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6030, ADU tax exemptions, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6030 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6030 is moved to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6175 concerning housing affordability tax incentives for existing structures, receive a due pass recommendation. There is a proposed, I also move the proposed second substitute 51 by Senator Billig.
Proposed second substitute 51 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adoption say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed second substitute 51 has been adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 6175 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6175 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6175 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6215, improving tax and revenue laws, with a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6215 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6215 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures. That ends the voting on Pack 3, and we are ready for staff briefing on Packet 4.
Substitute Senate Bill 5946 is a Department of Natural Resources request legislation. It establishes a fallen firefighter memorial on the Capitol campus and creates the fallen firefighter account in the custody of the state treasurer. The fiscal note has an impact to the general fund of $440,000 in fiscal year 25 and $946,000 across the outlook period, and there are no amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6121 includes the combustion of natural vegetation in portable flame cap kilns as an activity for which agencies may permit agricultural or silvicultural burning under the Clean Air Act. The fiscal note identifies indeterminate cash receipts into the air pollution control account and impact to the operating budget of $145,000 in fiscal year '25 and $538,000 across 4 years from the air pollution control account, and there are no amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6092 requires the Department of Ecology to research and deliver a report on the climate-related disclosure requirements administered by the Securities and Exchange Commission, including those under the proposed Rule 87. The fiscal note on the substitute identifies a one-time cost to the general fund of $748,000 in fiscal year '25, and this is updated information since yesterday's public hearing. Saturday's public hearing. There is one amendment, Amendment 52, offered by Senator Nguyen, which changes the deadline for the legislative report from January 1, 2025 to July 1, 2025. Substitute Senate Bill 6163 requires the Department of Ecology to establish PFAS sampling and testing requirements for biosolids, complete an analysis of PFAS chemical levels in biosolids, and report back to the legislature with a summary and recommendations. The fiscal note identifies an impact to the operating budget of $114,000 in fiscal year '25 and $897,000 across the 4 years from the MOTCA operating and biosolids permits accounts, and cash receipts into the biosolids permit account at $408,000 next biennium. And there are no amendments.
Senate Bill 6058 is the carbon market linkage bill with California and Quebec. The bill authorizes the Department of Ecology to change the length of the compliance periods under the Cap and Vest program and modifies definitions related to electricity importing and reports, and increases the percent of allowances a covered entity, a covered or opt-in entity may buy from 10% to 25%. It continues the prohibition on general market participation from owning more than 10% of the total allowances issued in a calendar year. It clarifies that when offset projects on tribal lands or from jurisdictions linked with Washington apply toward compliance obligations, eliminates Ecology's discretion to reduce penalties for failure to submit compliance instruments. The fiscal note on the bill, it was $1.8 million in fiscal '25. Those costs are related to both rulemaking required under the bill as well as changes to the greenhouse gas reporting system. There are 3 amendments on this bill. The first amendment is Amendment number 53 by Senator Banky. Excuse me. This bill specifies that all biofuels, rather than only those with 40% lower greenhouse gas emissions, are exempt under the Climate Commitment Act. It specifies that the annual reduction in allowance budgets, rather than authorizing the Department of Ecology to set them by rule, it decreases the total program allowance budgets, this is annual budgets, relative to the previous year by 3.6% each calendar year from 2024 through 2026, and 3.1% from calendar years 2041 through 2049. It also directs Ecology to place an additional 5% of the annual allowance budgets for calendar years 2031 through 2042 into the allowance price containment reserve by July 1st of 2024, and directs that the initial additional allowances placed in the APCR to be made available in separate auctions during the 2024 calendar year in addition to the normally scheduled APCR auctions, and amends the table. Or title, excuse me. The second amendment is Amendment number 54, offered by Senator Nguyen. This amendment would add a definition of electricity wheeled through Washington. It also directs that if the Department of Ecology determines that electricity purchased from a Federal Power Marketing Administration is not from a specified source, the electricity importer is a covered entity under the Climate Commitment Act only when the emissions associated with imported electricity exceeds 25,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And the third and final amendment on this bill is also offered by Senator Banky. It would add legislative findings, including that the bill is intended to facilitate a state's ability to enter into a leakage agreement with other foreign and domestic and foreign jurisdictions, and creates a joint market for compliance instruments, and delegates broad authority for the Department of Ecology to exercise its discretion to negotiate a linkage agreement, declares that Ecology's negotiations on a linkage agreement are a matter of public interest, and it directs all meetings between Washington state employees and employees of other jurisdictions regarding a potential linkage agreement must be subject to the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, and that all communications must constitute a public record subject to the Public Records Act. Next bill is 5978. This bill authorizes OSPI to be the guarantor for a county that has agreed to provide loans to a school district under binding conditions and facing long-term financial distress. OSPI can adopt rules to implement this new authority, including a process for how OSPI will determine whether it is a guarantor and a process for enhanced financial oversight if a district defaults on its loan. The enhanced financial oversight must be in place for 1 year and require the district to submit a viable 2-year financial plan. The bill contains a $10 million appropriation from the general fund for the purposes of providing the contingent guarantor funding. The fiscal note was $10 million. Most of that was because there was the $10 million appropriation in the bill and $16,000 worth of rulemaking. There is one amendment. Amendment number 56 by Senator Robinson. This amendment removes the $10 million appropriation. And Senate Bill 5789.
Excuse me, Senator Mullet has a question on 5978.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Michael, so the $10 million operating budget appropriation is removed. If the bill were to move forward without that, would the $10 million guarantee then count against our constitutional debt limit in the capital budget?
The bill, Section 1 still has the piece that the OSPI is still the guarantor for the purposes of the loan. I think the 10 million was there as a backstop in the event that it was used.
So would our constitutional debt capacity in the capital budget would go down by that $10 million then?
I think it would go down by the loan the county itself, or whatever the county took on.
Yeah, okay.
And 5789. This is the sales and use tax for school construction projects. This bill changes the SCAP formula so that the state will pay the full sales and use tax levied on all costs chargeable to a school construction project. There are no amendments. That's all you need.
Okay, next up is substitute Senate Bill 5444, an act relating to firearms-sensitive places. This bill would prohibit individuals from entering certain designated places while knowingly possessing a weapon. The fiscal impact is mainly around the signage requirements at state buildings for a total impact of $554,000 with a 2-year general fund impact of that amount of $279,000 with a 4-year outlook of $300,000. There are 3 amendments. The first amendment offered by Senator Mullet is number 57 in your packet. The effect is it amends the prohibition against carrying weapons on the premises of zoos and aquariums to apply to zoos and aquariums accredited or certified by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums or the Zoological Association of America. And 2, removes park facilities where children are likely to be present from the list of locations where the possession of weapons is prohibited. This amendment likely reduces the cost of on the fiscal note, especially those regarding the state parks, which my look on the fiscal note was around $64,000. The second amendment offered by Senator Gildon is number 58. The fact is that it exempts color guards and honor guards from the newly created weapons prohibitions while arriving at, participating in, or departing in an event in which the color guard or honor guard is providing its services. The fiscal impacts of this amendment are unknown. And Senator Wagner offers the third amendment, number 59. The fact is it exempts the activities of color guards and honor guards, including but not limited to staging and logistical requirements related to burial and interment ceremonies from the newly created weapons prohibitions. Fiscal impacts of this amendment are unknown. Next bill, substitute Senate Bill 5972, an act relating to the use of.
Excuse me, Jed, is there a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Jed, what's the difference between the Gildon and Wagner amendments, I guess? They sounded very similar. Is there?
They
full uniform. Okay.
Do basically close to the same thing, slightly different. There's some ones for staging, the other ones for the arriving at, participating, and coming away. They both can exist, so don't have to worry about one being out of order. You could adopt both of them, and both could exist within statute, if that was your question, part of your question. Okay, ready for next one? Substitute Senate Bill 5972, an act relating to the use of neonicotinoids pesticides. It prohibits a person from using neonicotinoids pesticides on outdoor plants beginning January 1st of 2026, unless the appropriation is made by a licensed most of the applications made by a licensed applicator or during the production of an agricultural commodity. It allows the director of the Department of Agriculture to authorize the use of neonicotinoid pesticides upon identification of an urgent pest threat. The impact of the bill was at a general fund estimate of $379,000 with a 4-year outlook of $1.2 million. There is one amendment, an amendment offered by Senator Wilson, number 60 in the EBB. The effect clarifies that a person may not use neonicotinoid pesticides on non-production outdoor ornamental plants, trees, and turf, and makes a certain technical correction. The effect of this bill is really it narrows down the uses that are banned. The fiscal impacts are unknown from this amendment. Moving on to substitute Senate Bill 5784, deer and elk, an act relating to deer and elk damage to commercial crops. It increases the annual compensation limit for commercial crop damage claims caused by deer and elk paid by the State General Fund from $30,000 to $300,000. Establishes a limit of $30,000 for an appeal of a decision of the Department of Fish and Wildlife addressing deer and elk damage to commercial crops. Also increases the limit for an individual damage claim from $10,000 to $30,000 and creates a 3-year pilot program for the Department of Fish and Wildlife to collar and monitor elk in south central Washington in an effort to prevent crop and property damage. The fiscal impacts were determined to be $836,000 on the 2-year general fund and a 4-year outlook impact of about approximately $1.6 million. There is one amendment to this offered by Senator Vandeweghe. The effect adds that legislative intent was never to assume responsibility for deer and elk crop damage claims in excess of amounts appropriated for that purpose. Specifies that additional funding to address claims in excess of amounts appropriated and clarifies that claims awarded or agreed upon that are unpaid due to being in excess of funds available in the current fiscal year are eligible for payment in the next fiscal year. Provides that if additional funds are not appropriated in the subsequent fiscal year for unpaid claims, no further payment may be made. Clarifies that payment of a claim is conditional on availability of specific funding and is not a guarantee of reimbursement. The fiscal impacts are indeterminate on this as it's discretionary dependent on each legislative session for any costs that are above appropriation. Okay, Senate Bill 6036, egg pests and disease. Establishes that an agricultural pest and disease response account, so a new account to the system, directs the state treasurer upon issuance of a declaration of emergency related to the infestation of plant pests or plant disease, or issuance of a quarantine order related to animal diseases or plant pest disease, to transfer to the account the amount needed to bring the balance of the account up to $2 million. The fiscal impact is that based on when a declaration of emergency is made, $2 million will be transferred out of the general fund for that fiscal year. There is a null and void clause on the bill. And there is an amendment offered by Senator Robinson, amendment number 62, and it would remove the null and void clause. Substitute Senate Bill 6039, geothermal energy resources. An act related to promoting the development of geothermal energy resources, directs the Washington Geological Survey as a subunit of the Department of Natural Resources to compile and maintain a publicly available comprehensive database of state subsurface geologic information. Directs the Department of Natural Resources to update its geothermal resources lease rates. Directs the Department of Commerce to establish a competitive geothermal exploration cost share grant program to incentivize and offset the direct costs associated with deep exploratory drilling to identify locations suitable for the development of geothermal energy, and directs the Department of Ecology to engage in a collaborative process to identify opportunities and risks associated with the development of geothermal resources. Fiscal impacts are estimated at $2.1 million total funds. Of that, the general fund on the 2 years is about $1.1 million with a 4-year impact of $2.9 million. The difference is the Department of Ecology indicated in their fiscal note the eligibility of the climate commitment account as a funding source. There are 2 provisions for grants specified. Both are subject to appropriation, and the cost for the grants is indeterminate and is not reflected in the fiscal note. There are no amendments. Next bill. Substitute Senate Bill 5600 as Universal Communications Program. It's an act that extends the expiration date for the State Universal Communications Service Program, and the bill that's before the body extends that expiration date by 10 years. The fiscal impact is that it would take $5 million per year from the general fund to transfer into the non-appropriated Universal Communications Services account. That would have a 4-year impact of around $15 million. There is an amendment offered by Senator Robinson. It's number 63. The effect is that it extends the expiration date of the Universal Communication Services Program by 1 year instead of the 10 years. It requires a report from the Utilities and Transportation Commission, that's the agency that administers this account, to identify the number of residents benefiting and the geographic areas served, describes the ways that the receiving companies use the money, the distribution amounts to each company, and the implications to service delivery, access, and availability to benefiting residents if the funding was no longer available, and instructs that if there is any other information or analysis that would help inform future appropriation decisions to be included in the report. And
Senator Wagoner has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the question is for you because it's your amendment. So I understand that there's a direct year per $5 million impact on this, but does the 1 year work in terms of the construction schedules that they are implementing to get this cable in the ground or whatever it is they're doing? So I understand the caution of putting a time limit because it's 5 million, 5 million, 5 million, but does this work for projects in terms of project planning?
It's my understanding, and you can correct me, Jed, that this funding is for ongoing maintenance, not new construction projects.
Yeah. So there are a number of funding sources that go for telecommunications, and I don't know if it's coincidental or purposeful, but there's also another funding source that has a very similar sounding name, the Universal Services Fund. They both have the word universal in it. This program is called the Universal Communication Services, and it's meant for small rural telecommunication companies for their service that they provide to keep their costs down so that the clients of those would have a commensurate monthly bill to the more urban settings. So it does not directly have anything to do with build out of broadband.
Oh, thank you.
Whereas that other fund source, the Universal Services Fund, more of a federal funds, that is about the build out and further development of broadband. Hope that helps. Okay, then the next bill, Senate Bill 5902, State Parks accounts. It's an act relating to reinvesting account revenue for the purpose of supporting the state park system. It adds 4 of the existing accounts used by the State Parks and Recreation Commission to the list of accounts that receive the earned interest from the Treasury income account. Those 4 accounts are the Parkland Acquisition Account, State Parks Renewal and Stewardship Account, the Snowmobile account, and the Winter Recreation Program account. And it also amends the Parkland Acquisition Account to make it a non-appropriated account. The impact of this bill, based on a scenario from the fiscal note, is a deduction from the general fund of $2.8 million with a 4-year impact of $5.4 million. There is an amendment offered by Senator Van Wey, and it's really a technical correction. It corrects for a drafting error that amended the wrong statute related to adding the Parkland Acquisition Account to a list of accounts that may receive interest from the Treasurer's Trust Fund. There's no perceived fiscal impact from this amendment. And the last bill here is Senate Bill 6100, Budget Stabilization Account. This is really an appropriations bill. It's related to making expenditures from the Budget Stabilization Account for declared catastrophic events, and it authorizes an appropriation from the Budget Stabilization Account for a portion of the total fire mobilization and suppression costs from the 2023 fire year. There is one amendment offered by Senator Robinson. This is amendment number 65. The effect, it updates the appropriation amount that is eligible to cover fire suppression costs consistent with the governor's declared state of emergency. That number has changed from $19,395,000 up to $21,143,000. With that, I think that is packet 4.
That was a lot, Chad. Thank you for that briefing. One announcement before we break for caucus. There are a few members who missed signing boards this time around. So make sure you do sign them as you're going to caucus. As soon as we finish with this caucus, the boards for whatever that round was, 3, will go upstairs. So please make sure you take care of that. And we will break for caucus and be back. Calling us back into executive session for the purpose of voting on bills in group number 4. And I will start by saying we will not be taking action on Senate Bill 5978. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I move that substitute Senate Bill 5946, establishing a fallen firefighters memorial, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5946, establishing a fallen firefighter memorial, move with the due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you have moved substitute Senate Bill 5946 to the Rules Committee with a due pass recommendation subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6121 concerning agricultural and forestry biomass that receives due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6121 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6121 passes to the Rules Committee with subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6092 concerning the disclosures of greenhouse gas emissions and receive a due pass recommendation. I also move Amendment 52 by Senator Nguyen. Me.
Amendment 52 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 6092 and that second substitute Senate Bill 6092 receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 6092 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 6092 has passed to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6163 concerning biosolids with a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6163 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6163 has passed to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6058, facilitating linkage of Washington's carbon markets with the California-Quebec carbon market and receive a due pass recommendation. I also move Amendment 53 by Senator Banky.
So Amendment 53 has been
He's not there.
moved and seconded.
Do you want? I don't know. He was gonna pull it, so I don't know. Oh, he's gonna pull it? Yeah, but I don't want to do it on his behalf.
Should we suspend action on this till he comes back? Okay. Can we just suspend action on this bill, move on to the next one and come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then with that, I move Senate Bill 5789 concerning the sales and use tax for school construction assistance program capital projects, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5789 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 5789 has passed to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5444 concerning firearm-sensitive places receive a due pass recommendation. And I also move Amendment 57 by Senator Mullet.
Amendment 57 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I also move Amendment 58 by Senator Gildon.
Senator Gildon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will withdraw this amendment. I think we're about to hear one that is very, very similar.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 59 by Senator Wagner.
Amendment 59 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment has been adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendments be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5444, and that second substitute Senate Bill 5444 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5444 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5444 has passed to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures. We'll go back to
6058.
substitute Senate Bill 6058, and I think we'll just start over.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6058, facilitating linkage of Washington's carbon markets with the California-Quebec carbon market, and it receive a due pass recommendation. I also move the Amendment 53 by Senator Banky.
Senator Binky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for my lateness. This gets to the compliance curve. Excuse me. While we're getting to the opportunities of meeting our goals, we want to make sure we have an off-ramp that everybody can comply to. It gives a reasonable opportunity for businesses to really look at the data and know the impacts that this is going on as we get through a complicated nature of the carbon markets and what we're looking at, how we discuss with Quebec, California, and others and the details of that data. We want to make sure the impacts to our businesses are really transparent and know what they're getting into. So I urge a yes vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to urge a no vote at this time on Amendment 53. There's another piece of policy that I think is similar. This one, there might be a technical correction that needs to be made in that policy, and also changing the title causes a bit of concern as well. So urging a no vote.
All those in favor of adopting Amendment 53 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 54.
Amendment 54 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'll just do it real quick. Madam Chair, Amendment 54 largely tries to address some concerns that our utilities had as it relates to unspecified emissions that are coming from, say, for instance, BPA. We think that this is a balance. I'm sure we're going to hear more about it, but this is what some of the rural utilities have wanted along with ecology, so I urge your support.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Amendment 54 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 55 by Senator Binky.
Amendment 55 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Binky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This gets back to our transparency and what we have in the state of Washington. We just want to make sure it's standardized across the board. So when we link with any other state or any other jurisdiction, especially Quebec, we want to make sure they uphold the Open Public Meetings Act, the data privacy, the transparency in our markets, and the things that we could showcase with the general public. We want to make sure we're transparent and accountable in our actions, and this gets to that same standard. So I urge a yes vote.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, I'm going to urge a no vote at this time, although I do agree that we need to be committed to transparency and having a line of sight in terms of kind of these discussions. Just by the nature of the work being done here, there's a number of opportunities where there's market-sensitive information that could potentially be compromised. Also, candidly, compelling our public records, laws upon California, Quebec would pose some additional logistical challenges as well. I do want to note that this is simply having a discussion about linkage. Doesn't necessarily commit us to that process right now as well. So I assure you that any actual policy recommendations by the legislature would be subject to some of this work. So urging a no vote at this time.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Amendment 55 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendment be rolled into Second Substitute Senate Bill 6058, and that Second Substitute Senate Bill 6058 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Second Substitute Senate Bill 6058 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out that although there is, I think, language in the bill that says it's not an alternative, I think a lot of legal analysis is saying this will be an alternative to Initiative 2117 if it makes it all the way through the legislature. And considering we haven't yet had a hearing on Initiative 2117, it seems like we're getting ahead of ourselves to do this. Although I agree with much of the policy in the bill, I think that it seems right when we have almost 500,000 citizens who have signed the initiative that this would move forward as a potential alternative without hearing the initiative. It seems like we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I'd encourage a no on this bill.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Second Substitute Senate Bill 6058, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. By your vote, Second Substitute Senate Bill 6058 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I move that Substitute Senate Bill 5972 concerning the use of neonicotinoids pesticides receive a due pass recommendation. And I also move Amendment 60 by Senator Wilson.
Amendment 60 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting, no, we should speak against it.
Madam Chair, I'm going to urge a no vote at this time on Amendment 60.
All those in favor of adopting Amendment 60 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move that Substitute Senate Bill 5972 concerning the use of neonicotinoids and pesticides receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Second Substitute Senate Bill 5972.
First substitute, Senator.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that Substitute Senate Bill 5972 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. By your vote, Substitute Senate Bill 5972 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Substitute Senate Bill 5784 concerning deer and elk damage to commercial crops receive a due pass recommendation. And I also move the proposed Second Substitute 61 by Senator Van Weeg.
Proposed Second Substitute 61 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The Second Substitute 61 is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the Second Substitute Senate Bill 5784 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Second Substitute Senate Bill 5784 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5784 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 6036 concerning agricultural pest and disease response receive a due pass recommendation. And I move Amendment 62 by Senator Robinson.
Amendment 62 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Mazzal?
No, ma'am.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 6036, and that substitute Senate Bill 6036 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6036 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6036 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 6039, promoting the development of geothermal energy resources, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6039 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6039 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 5600, extending the expiration date for the State Universal Communication Services Program, receive a due pass recommendation. And I do move the proposed second substitute 63 by Senator Robinson.
Proposed second substitute 63 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, or the second substitute 63 has been adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5600 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5600 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5600 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5902, reinvesting account revenue for the purpose of supporting the state park systems, receive a due pass recommendation. And I move the proposed substitute 64 by Senator Vanderweg.
Proposed substitute 64 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting proposed substitute 64 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The substitute is adopted.
I move that the substitute Senate Bill 5902 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5902 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5902 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6100, making expenditures from the budget stabilization accounts for declared catastrophic events, receive a due pass recommendation. And I move the proposed substitute 65 by Senator Robinson.
Proposed substitute 65 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting proposed substitute 65 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The substitute 65 is adopted.
I move that the substitute Senate Bill 6100 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6100 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6100 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures. That ends voting on packet 4, and we are ready for staff briefing on bills in Group 5.
Substitute Senate Bill 5598, which was heard last year, is an act relating to the funding of legalized horse racing and the recreational use of horses in Washington state. This bill creates an exemption in the parimutuel tax, requires an annual appropriation from the general fund into the Washington Horse Racing Commission operating account, establishes grant programs, and provides the commission the authority to impose fees. The fiscal impact is a $6 million transfer from the general fund, or $18 million over the 4-year. Revenue impact will have a loss of $1 million per year or $3 million over the 4-year from that tax exemption. There is an amendment to 5598 proposed by Senator Mullet. That is number 66. The effect, it's really, there's 2 fiscal impact drivers. It establishes a $1.35 million down from the $6 million annual appropriation over a 6-year period. That's annual. To the Horse Racing Commission operating account. It removes the parimutuel tax exemption, so it negates the roughly $1 million loss of revenue. Additionally, the amendment requires expenditures from the account after the Commission's operating expenses to be distributed annually as follows: 10% as grants to nonprofit entities involved with equine rescue and rehoming organizations, and the remaining 90% to Class 1 racing associations for costs associated with required expenses from the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority's gross assessment, and to support certain components of the equine industry and nonprofit race meets.
Senator Mullet has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, this is one time, right? The 1.35.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, yeah, I thought you said it was ongoing. It's just the one time.
No, it's one time.
Thank you.
Senate Bill 6087 concerning the fire service training account, sponsored by Senator King, increases the share of fire service premium monies dedicated to the fire service training account from 20% to 25%. This will have a general fund impact of $1.5 million per FY, or $4.8 million over the 4-year. There are no amendments. Senate Bill 5803 concerning recruiting and retention of the Washington National Guard, sponsored by Senator Conway, establishes recruiting and reenlistment bonus programs. The general fund cost is $23,000 per fiscal year, or $69,000 over the 4-year just to administer the program with an indeterminate cost. The actual bonus is estimated at just under $1 million per FY, or about $3 million over the 4-year. There's an amendment, proposed substitute 67 from Senator Conway. This amendment removes the reenlistment bonus section of the bill, leaving only the recruiting referral program.
Senate Bill 5904 extends the terms of eligibility for the Washington College Grant, College Bound Scholarship, and Passport to Careers financial aid programs up to 6 years or 150% of program length. The fiscal note shows indeterminate costs. However, WASAC estimates $8.3 million in the current biennium and $25 million in the 4-year outlook if 20% of students with 1 year of eligibility needed an additional year to complete a program. The governor's proposed budget includes $1 million one time for initial funding in the bill in fiscal year 25. There are no amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 6221 requires the Washington National Primate Research Center at UW to annually publish information about the non-human primates in its care and specifies what information must be included. The fiscal note shows costs of $278,000 GFS in the 23-25 biennium and $834,000 GFS in the 4-year outlook. There are 2 proposed substitutes. Proposed substitute 68 by Senator Randall. 1 removes the public posting requirement for the number of non-human primates killed or died as a part of research, a test, or a study at the center, injured or died due to causes not related to research at the center, and either showing symptoms or were treated for unintended illness or infection. 2, strikes the requirement that the center post information about the sources of funding for the research center. And 3, specifies that the requirements in this act do not supersede any requirements or exemptions under the Public Records Act or Open Public Meetings Act. The amendment would remove the costs in the fiscal note. Proposed substitute 69 by Senator Mullet removes the public posting requirement for the number of non-human primates killed or died as a part of research, a test, or a study at a center, injured or died due to cause not related to research at the center, and either showing symptoms or were treated for unintended illness or infection. And 2, strikes the requirement that the center post information about the sources of funding for the research center. The amendment would remove the costs in the fiscal note.
Senate Bill 6031 modifies the student transportation allocation to accommodate multiple vehicle types for transporting students. There is a fiscal note from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, one-time costs of $130,000 in 2025, and indeterminate costs given changes of transportation formula with the new data collected. There is an amendment offered by Senator Braun, number 70, would expand the school bus purchase and reimbursement process to include passenger vans used in lieu of school buses. This has minimal cost. Senate Bill 5873 provides essentially providing adequate and predictable student transportation. Amendment number 71 offered by Senator Robinson. The proposed substitute has the following effects. Removes the underlying bill provisions that amended the pupil transportation funding formula, directed 100% reimbursement for special passenger categories, and required an audit of school district expenditures. It directs the superintendent of public instruction to use the analysis of school district transportation costs to develop a transparent, predictable, and comprehensive student transportation funding model. It specifies the minimum demographic groups and unique district characteristics that must be addressed in the new transportation funding formula. It provides additional funding in the amount of $400 per student for students that require special transportation relating to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. It modifies the health and requirement benefit language for employees of non-governmental entities that contract with school districts for pupil transportation. It requires that all pupil transportation service contracts entered into or modified after the bill's effective date must include a detailed explanation of any contract cost increased by year, expenditure type, and amount, including increases resulting from the providing of required benefits. There is a fiscal note on the original bill from the Office of Superintendent in Public Instruction that is indeterminate. This amendment would substantially reduce the fiscal note. However, we don't have a fiscal note present.
Do you have any information about just the homeless student piece?
I don't know. Don't know that. Substitute Senate Bill 5956 relates to the maximum per pupil limit for enrichment levies. There's a fiscal note on the original bill with local cost of $26.5 million. With a substitute, with the substitute bill, there are likely to increase. There are no amendments to my knowledge. Substitute Senate Bill 5809 concerns enrichment funding for charter public schools. There is a fiscal note of $6.9 million in 2025 and $30.1 million over 4 years. I'm not aware of any amendments. Substitute Senate Bill 5882 relating to increased prototypical school staffing to better meet school needs. The original bill has a fiscal note of $111 million in 2025 and $771 million over 4 years. There are 4 amendments. Amendment number 72 is a proposed substitute offered by Senator Robinson. The effect of the amendment, it modifies the staff allocation adjustments in the prototypical funding model for teaching assistants, office support staff, and non-instructional aides, replacing a 3-year phase-in with an immediate but reduced increase allocations beginning in the 2024-25 school year. The fiscal effect of this amendment is $49.6 million in 2025. Amendment number 73, offered by Senator Mullet, the effect is as follows. Specifies that the intent of an additional funding is to assist school districts in hiring additional support staff or providing the staff that already employ better wages. Directs the superintendent of public instruction to develop rules to require school districts to use additional funding support and to support increased staffing, prevent layoffs, or prevent salaries, or increase salaries for the following staff types in the school year: paraeducators, office support staff, and non-instructional aides. It also directs the superintendent to collect data from school districts on how the increased allocations are used, and it replaces references to teaching assistants with paraeducators in the prototypical school model. There's little fiscal effect. Amendment number 74 by Senator Braun has the following effect. It removes provisions related to staffing units for teaching assistants, office support, and non-instructional aides from the prototypical school model. It increases funding for material, supplies, and operating costs, or MSOC allocations, in the prototypical school model by $150 per student, divided among the various MSOC categories. And finally, it increases the state local effort assistance, LEA, threshold value from $1,550 per student to $250 per student, to be adjusted for inflation from 2025. The fiscal effect is approximately $158 million for the MSOC portion in 2025 and approximately $150 million for LEA in 2025. And finally, amendment number 75 offered by Senator Hasegawa. The effect is as follows: increases the minimum learning assistance program allocation for high poverty schools from 1.1 hours per week of extra instruction to 2.2 hours per week for extra instruction. The fiscal effect is approximately $112 million in 2025 and $408 million over 4 years.
Senator Braun has a question.
Not so much a question, Madam Chair, it's just to explain the point of that. My amendment was to offer another alternative on how you might spend this money and address some of the issues that were raised in this bill and others more equitably across different schools. So it's just offering a different idea as we go into caucus to think about how this is going to be expensive no matter what you do with this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Educating kids, it's expensive. Thank you.
Substitute Senate Bill 6264 relates to supporting the implementation of competency-based education. The fiscal note shows an indeterminate cost, and there are no amendments. Senate Bill 5850 relating to students who are chronically absent and at risk for not graduating high school. All sections of the bill are subject to amounts appropriated. However, if fully funded, OSPI anticipates the bill to have a total cost of $5.8 million in fiscal year 25 and a total cost of $16.4 million over the 4-year outlook period. There is one amendment, Amendment 76, offered by Senator Braun, that does 5 things. First, it adds examples of necessary supports as it relates to the training and coaching that educational service districts must offer to school district staff who support students who are chronically absent and connect them to these supports. Second, it adds that grant funds to support students who are chronically absent may be used for connecting students to behavioral health supports. Third, it allows community and technical colleges to apply for these grants in addition to community-based organizations and tribes. Fourth, it directs the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to allocate funding to community and technical colleges in addition to educational service districts, school districts, and public schools to eliminate barriers to high school completion for students who are enrolled in a statewide dropout re-engagement program. And then fifth, it adds that these allocations may be used for supports such as connecting students to behavioral health supports and contracting with nationally recognized providers of chronic absenteeism programs. I anticipate these may increase the fiscal impact of fully funding the bill, but it is all subject to appropriation. Substitute Senate Bill 5849.
Excuse me, Trevor. Just before you brief this, I plan to withdraw proposed second substitute 77, so you don't have to brief that.
Okay. So substitute Senate Bill 5849 requires all students to show competency in high school learning standards related to computer science in order to graduate from high school beginning with the 2029 graduating class. There was a revised fiscal note that came out yesterday that still shows an indeterminate cost, but has a new assumptions that make the cost estimate of the bill much lower. So the revised fiscal note specifies an estimated cost of about $4.9 million in the current biennium and $14.5 million over the 4-year outlook period. Okay, so there is, I guess, one amendment then to this bill, Amendment 79, offered by Senator Hasagawa, which directs the State Board of Education to collect relevant disaggregated demographic data on the computer science competency graduation requirement to assess if it has created any negative impacts on any class of students. This should increase the fiscal impact of the bill. And then the other one offered by Senator Hasagawa, I think, would be not existent. Okay. Moving along to Senate Bill 5852, which restricts the Safety Net Oversight Committee's review of documentation that illustrates adherence to Safety Net award criteria to confirming documented and quantified services and evidence of expenditures only. The fiscal note specifies a total cost of $581,000 in fiscal year 25 and $1.7 million over the 4-year outlook period. There are no amendments. Proposed second substitute Senate Bill 5955 creates the Port District Equity Fund, which can be used for grants to qualifying port districts to supplement noise mitigation programs. The new fund will receive monies from a one-time $10 million appropriation and from a transfer of up to $10 million per year based off the amount of sales and use tax collected on qualifying construction projects at qualifying port districts. The estimated cost of the bill is approximately $10.1 million in fiscal year 25. And $30.2 million over the 4-year outlook period. There are 2 amendments. Amendment 81, offered by Senator Kaiser, does 4 things. It makes several changes to the intent section. It authorizes a port district providing additional benefits to properties that already receive sound mitigation equipment that is determined through the inspection to be in need of repairs or replacement, to contract directly with building direct inspectors or other professionals with experience in sound testing or window and door installations. Third, it clarifies that a support district may contract with building inspectors or other professionals with experience in sound testing or window and door installs, rather than a state certified building inspector, to determine whether package failure resulted in additional hazards or structural damage to the property. And then fourth, it makes other technical changes. It shouldn't have a significant fiscal impact. Amendment 82, offered by Senator Robinson, removes the appropriation from the bill. Senate Bill 6080 removes the requirement that the deposit into the statewide tourism marketing account must be authorized in the biennial budget. There is no fiscal impact for this bill, and there are no amendments. And then finally, substitute Senate Bill 5851 designates April as an International Genocide Prevention Awareness Month, encourages public schools to offer at least one Holocaust and genocide education standalone elective at least once during grades 6 through 12, and then requires instruction on the Holocaust and genocide education when the topic aligns with social studies learning standards. The fiscal note specifies a total cost of $150,000 in fiscal year 24 and $342,000 over the 4-year outlook period. There is one amendment, Amendment 83, offered by Senator Wellman, which specifies that the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction will collaborate with a nonprofit organization with expertise in teaching the lessons of the Holocaust and other nonprofit organizations led by underrepresented communities impacted by genocide with expertise in education of other genocides, crimes against humanity, the ethnic studies in different regions of the world and at various points in history, rather than with a single nonprofit organization for development of best practices and guidance for genocide instruction, and for supporting teachers to implement these best practices and guidelines. This may increase the fiscal impact of the bill.
Okay, thank you. A couple of announcements. Make sure that you are signing the boards. They will process signatures on packet 4 bills at the end of the upcoming caucus, so make sure you're up to date on that. And then pizza is coming for dinner around 6, so we'll have to accommodate that as we caucus. And we are ahead of schedule. That's why we're
Yeah, we got an email about pizza.
Pizza while you are in caucus, packet 5, just prior to 6, so. You're okay with finishing early? Okay. We're at ease for caucus. Calling us back into executive session for the purpose of voting on bills in Group 5. I will begin by saying we will be not be taking action on Substitute Senate Bill 6221, Substitute Senate Bill 5956, and Substitute Senate Bill 5809. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that substitute Senate Bill 5598 concerning funding of legalized horse racing and the recreational use of horses in Washington State receive a due pass recommendation. I also move the proposed second substitute 66 by Senator Mullet.
The proposed second substitute 66 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the proposed second substitute signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The substitute is adopted.
I move that the second substitute Senate Bill 5598 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5598 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? With your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5598 has passed and will move to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6087 concerning the fire service training account receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6087 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6087 has passed to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5803 concerning the recruitment and retention of Washington National Guard members receive a due pass recommendation. Then I move the proposed substitute 67 by Senator Conway.
The proposed substitute 67 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Substitute is adopted.
I move that the substitute Senate Bill 5803 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5803 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5803 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5904, extending the terms of eligibility for financial aid programs, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5904 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 5904 has passed to the Rules Committee subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6031, modifying the student transportation allocation to accommodate multiple vehicle types for transporting students, receive a due pass recommendation. And then there also is an amendment. I move Amendment 70 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 70 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? You're okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 70 is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 6031, and that substitute Senate Bill 6031 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
Substitute Senate Bill 603, has been moved and seconded It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6031 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill has passed, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5873, providing adequate and predictable student transportation, receive a due pass recommendation. And there's also a proposed substitute, so I move proposed substitute 71 by Senator Robinson.
Proposed substitute 71 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the substitute signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Substitute has been adopted.
I move that the substitute Senate Bill 5873 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5873 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5873 has passed, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5882, increasing prototypical school staffing to better meet student needs, receive a due pass recommendation. And I move the proposed second substitute 72 by Senator Robinson. And then there are a few amendments, so I move Amendment 73 by Senator Mullet.
Amendment 73 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of Amendment 73 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 74 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 74 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'm going to ask for a no on this amendment.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go
I withdraw
ahead.
this amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 75 by Senator Hasagawa.
Amendment 75 has been moved and seconded. Senator Hasagawa.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So there are some school districts that really struggle and are struggling right now, and Tukwila School District is one of those financially because it's so expensive to educate adequately students who may come to school and don't even speak English. It takes a lot of resources to make sure that these children are getting the best education we can possibly get them so they can succeed in our society. And the current prototypical school model is equal but not equitable. And so the LAP is there to try and build some equity into our funding model, but it's still inadequate. And school districts like Tukwila, for instance, you may have heard that there's been some issues with asylum seekers flooding into the area. So the district is getting lots and lots of new students who are totally unaware of what our society is all about and how do you educate children like that. Well, the paraeducators who come from those communities or who understand or at least speak the language can help with that a lot. But if we don't adequately fund our system to address these needs, then school districts like mine are going to continue to fall backwards. So I know that this is a really expensive amendment, and I know that it's going to have problems getting enough yes votes, but nonetheless, I think that it's important for us to understand that there's inequity in our system now, and we need to figure out how we're going to adjust for that. So would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hasagawa. Unfortunately, I need to ask for a no on this amendment tonight, although I certainly don't disagree with the fact that schools are struggling and pupils that come to our school with a lot of needs are, not always getting the best service. So, but for tonight, I'm asking for a no on this amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5882 and that the second substitute Senate Bill 5882 receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5882 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, you have passed second substitute Senate Bill 5882 to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 6264, supporting the implementation of competency-based education, and receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 6264 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 6264 has passed to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5850, supporting students who are chronically absent and at risk for not graduating high school, receive a due pass recommendation. And I move Amendment 76 by Senator Braun.
Amendment 76 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
I move that the amendment be rolled into substitute Senate Bill 5850, and that substitute Senate Bill 5850 receive a due pass recommendation be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that substitute Senate Bill 5850 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, substitute Senate Bill 5850 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5849 concerning a computer science competency graduation requirement with a due pass recommendation. And I also move the Amendment 79 by Senator Hasagawa.
Amendment 79 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Did you want to speak to that amendment?
You don't mind?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Let me see, Amendment 70, oh, is this 79 or 78?
79.
Oh, is that my amendment?
That is your amendment.
Oh, I have two amendments, no.
You have 79 and 78.
Okay, I'm not speaking on the one to the underlying bill.
You are speaking to the one because I withdrew the sub.
Oh, you withdrew the sub, okay, that makes sense. Okay, sorry for my confusion,
No
Madam
worries,
Chair.
it's late.
So, I agree. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill, to try and make sure that I understand how important digital literacy will be in the future. But I also understand that there's disparities in our current education system, and some students struggle more than others just to try and make it over the finish line for graduation. So what I would like to do is make sure that we collect data on the implementation of this bill so that we can understand if this bill actually may be having some disparately negative consequences to certain groups of students. So I appreciate your support on this.
Amendment 79 is before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment has been adopted.
Perfect. So I believe that the proposed second substitute 77 is being withdrawn, so just confirming.
Correct.
Perfect. So I move Amendment 78 by Senator Hasagawa.
I don't think we need that because that was to the sub.
That amendment would be out of order.
Okay.
Yeah, roll it into second substitute.
Perfect. Madam Chair, I move that the amendment be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5849, and that second substitute Senate Bill 5849 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5849 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your votes, second substitute Senate Bill 5849 has received a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 5852 concerning Special Education Safety Net Awards receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 5852 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 5852 has passed, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that substitute Senate Bill 5955, mitigating harm and improving equity in large port districts, receive a due pass recommendation. And I also move the proposed second substitute 80 by Senator Kaiser. And then there are amendments to that substitute, so I move Amendment 81 by Senator Kaiser.
Amendment 81 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of adopting Amendment 81 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment 82 by Senator Robinson.
Amendment 82 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of adopting Amendment 82 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 82 has been adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendments be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5955, and that second substitute Senate Bill 5955 receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5955 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? Senator Kaiser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for bringing this bill forward. We still have work to do on this bill, and I do want everyone to understand I am committed to complete the job to get this done. So we will be continuing to work on this as it moves forward. Thank you very much.
Senator Hasagawa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree. This is a really desperate situation by the looks of some of the photographs that we saw of the condition of some of these homes that were addressed years back. The question for me is, how did we get into such a mess? I mean, the contracting procedures back in the day, I mean, there apparently was no controls. I mean, people were going out of business after getting paid, but not, everything was substandard. There was no oversight over the process. I mean, it's horrible. So I hope that we don't repeat this again, that we have very close oversight over how this money is being spent. Another question to me is, there was federal money involved with this project, which means that it should have been at prevailed rates through Davis-Bacon regulations, and it's obvious to me that that did not happen. There's some desperate circumstances that are happening out there. This bill does have some problems, and I'm glad that Senator Kaiser's agreed to continue to work on this, because diverting sales tax and dedicating it to paying for this project, I don't think is the right approach. And I'm hoping that maybe we can get some capital budget money to address immediate needs right now. There might be some money available through Commerce, possibly on homeowner assistance or something like that. We'll take a look. But at any rate, don't mean to ramble, just want to thank Senator Kaiser for her work on this, and we have work left to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for those comments. We're ready to vote. Everyone in favor of second substitute Senate Bill 5955 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5955 has passed, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 6080, simplifying the funding provisions of the statewide tourism marketing account, receive a due pass recommendation, be sent to the Rules Committee.
It has been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 6080 receive a due pass recommendation to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? By your vote, Senate Bill 6080 has passed, subject to signatures.
Madam Chair, I move substitute Senate Bill 5851 concerning Holocaust and genocide education in public schools receive a due pass recommendation. There is an amendment. I move Amendment 83 by Senator Wellman.
Amendment 83 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Senator Wellman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In general, this amendment does speak to some changes that we would want to see in this bill. There have been a few words that are not quite right, and there will be a floor. We are committed to a floor amendment to make sure that it is fully as we intend. I'm asking for your support now to get it over onto the floor, but we will be making an amendment and hope to be supported then as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Amendment 83 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Amendment 83 is adopted.
Madam Chair, I move that the amendments be rolled into second substitute Senate Bill 5851. That second substitute Senate Bill 5851 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee.
It's been moved and seconded that second substitute Senate Bill 5851 receive a due pass recommendation and be sent to the Rules Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? By your vote, second substitute Senate Bill 5851 has passed subject to signatures. That concludes our business for tonight. I just want to take a minute to thank our staff. We've had a very efficient meeting today. We are adjourned.